In this video, we're diving into some of the darkest Simpsons lore that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. So sit back, relax, and let's start with the first one. The idea that Homer might actually be unkillable. So I've been thinking about this, and it's actually kind of messed up. Homer might literally be immune to death, and we've all been watching it happen without realizing how weird that is. Every cartoon character survives crazy stuff, right? But Homer is different. The show actually shows us the injuries and then shows us that he heals in ways that make no sense. In So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show, Homer gets caught in a massive beer explosion that puts him in a coma. He's literally blown up by carbonation pressure, strong enough to launch him through the air and destroy property. He just wakes up later like nothing happened. Any normal person would be dead from that blast. The fact that Homer survived is crazy. The fact that he makes a full recovery and walks out of the hospital like nothing happened is even crazier. But Homer is where things get really wild. Turns out Homer has had a crayon lodged in his brain since childhood. A crayon. Stuck in his frontal lobe for decades. The doctor removes it, and suddenly Homer becomes a genius because his brain can actually function properly without a waxy obstruction blocking critical neural pathways. This means Homer has been operating with a foreign object stabbed through his brain for his entire adult life. His marriage, his job, raising 3 kids, all while having a crayon blocking critical brain functions. Any normal person would have died from the infection alone. Brain injuries cause swelling. Foreign objects cause complications. The fact that Homer not only survived but functioned well enough to hold down a job, maintain relationships, and raise a family shows his body works by completely different rules than everyone else in Springfield. Think about the Springfield Gorge incident in Bart the Daredevil. Homer attempts to jump the gorge on Bart's skateboard to prove a point about safety. He fails spectacularly. He falls down the entire gorge, hitting jagged rocks repeatedly on the way down, bouncing off cliff faces with bone-crushing force. He lands at the bottom with enough impact to require full body casting. Then the ambulance taking him to the hospital hits a bump, he falls out, and he tumbles down the entire gorge again, hitting every single rock a second time. He survives both falls. He's in the hospital completely wrapped in casts, but he recovers. A fall like that should have killed him on the first impact. The second fall should have finished the job. Multiple compound fractures, internal bleeding, head trauma, but Homer just heals and goes back to normal life without lasting damage. Compare that to other characters in Springfield. When Moe tries to kill himself, he actually suffers and needs intervention. When Frank Grimes touches high voltage wires at the plant, he dies instantly in front of everyone. When Ned Flanders falls off the stadium bleachers, she's dead before the ambulance arrives. When Hans Moleman gets into accidents, he's genuinely hurt. They're all living normal lives with normal consequences. When they get injured, they stay injured. When they face death, death takes them. But Homer, he bounces back from everything. Like biology doesn't apply to him. Like the fundamental rules that govern mortality simply skip over him. Look at what happens with Homer's job at the nuclear plant. This is another massive red flag that everyone just ignores. Homer has been exposed to lethal doses of radiation for over 30 years. Multiple episodes show him being directly exposed to radioactive materials. In the Blunder years, we see he's been irradiated since childhood when he discovered the corpse at the quarry. Throughout the series, he casually handles glowing rods, swims in cooling pools, and eats food contaminated by plant materials. In one episode, his body literally glows green from accumulated radiation exposure. His genetics have been altered. His cells should be breaking down. He should have cancer in every organ. Radiation poisoning should have killed him decades ago. But Homer keeps going to work, keeps eating donuts, keeps living like radiation exposure isn't slowly cooking him from the inside. His alcohol consumption alone should have killed him. Homer drinks Duff beer constantly, multiple 6-packs daily for decades. His liver should have failed years ago. Cirrhosis should have set in. But medical episodes show he's somehow still functional despite drinking enough alcohol to kill several normal people. When they do tests on him, doctors are always shocked he's alive, but he just keeps going. The strangulation pattern with Bart is another thing everyone treats as normal. Bart does something wrong, Homer strangles him, Bart's face turns purple, and then they just move on. That's repeated oxygen deprivation to the brain. That causes lasting damage. But Homer does it constantly throughout the series, and Bart never shows signs of the neurological problems that should result from repeated strangulation. Why? Because in the Simpson household, normal consequences don't exist. The really messed up part is how Homer reacts to danger. Most people develop fear responses after traumatic experiences. You fall down a gorge twice, you develop a healthy respect for heights and gravity. You get blown up by a beer can, you become cautious around pressurized containers, you discover you've had brain damage for decades, you become more careful about your health. But Homer doesn't change. He doesn't learn. He doesn't adapt. He keeps touching hot stoves, keeps eating poisonous food, keeps doing dangerous stunts. His first thought after any near-death experience is always to go back to doing whatever dangerous thing he was doing before. He doesn't show any sign of understanding mortality or learning from consequences. Think about what this means for everyone else in Springfield. They're all forming genuine attachments to someone who will never truly understand their limitations or mortality. Marge worries constantly about losing Homer, watching him survive impossibility after impossibility, never knowing if this time will be different. But Homer can't actually die. The fear that drives her protective behavior is based on normal human vulnerability that Homer simply doesn't have. Bart and Lisa grow up watching their father survive things that should kill him. They're learning that consequences don't exist because their father faces none. That warps their understanding of risk and safety. They take dangerous actions throughout the series because they've internalized their father's invincibility as normal. When you really think about it, Homer is something else entirely, something that can't be stopped or changed or hurt in any permanent way, and everyone around him is just living their normal mortal lives while he continues being Homer forever, destroying his liver with alcohol, absorbing decades of radiation, suffering repeated brain trauma, falling down cliffs, getting blown up, having crayons in his brain, and he just keeps on going. He's genuinely immortal in a way that makes him fundamentally different from everyone in his family, and that changes everything about his relationships and his place in the world. Everyone he knows will eventually die. Marge will age and pass away. His kids will grow old and die. But Homer will still be there, unchanged, unkillable, probably working at the same nuclear plant and drinking at the same bar, outliving everyone who ever cared about him. Now let's talk about Lisa's dark future theory. Lisa might be trapped in a predetermined cycle of failure no matter how hard she tries. Here's something that's been bothering me about Lisa for years. Every single flash-forward episode shows Lisa unsuccessful and unhappy, despite being the smartest person in Springfield. That's not random. That's a pattern. In Lisa's wedding, we see teenage Lisa meeting a British guy at college who seems perfect for her. She's educated, refined, everything she always wanted to become. But the episode reveals her wedding falls apart because her fiancé can't handle her family's dysfunction. She ends up alone. The flash forward shows her achieving her dream of leaving Springfield and getting educated, but it doesn't matter. Her family's chaos follows her everywhere and destroys her chance at happiness. Future drama shows Lisa and Bart as teenagers still living in Springfield, still dealing with the same family problems. Lisa hasn't escaped. She's stuck in the exact place she's been trying to leave her entire childhood. All her academic achievement, all her planning, all her desperate attempts to build a better future, and she's right back where she started. The episode shows her Yale acceptance getting stolen by Bart, which derails her entire educational trajectory. One moment of bad luck ruins everything she worked for. Bart to the future is even darker. Lisa actually becomes president of the United States, which should be the ultimate success story. But the episode frames it as a disaster. She inherits a country in economic collapse because of Bart's previous presidency. Her entire term is spent cleaning up his mess. She achieves the highest office in the land and spends every moment of it miserable, stressed, and unable to actually accomplish anything meaningful. Success becomes just another form of suffering. Days of Future shows adult Lisa, divorced, struggling, and still dealing with family dysfunction. She made it through college, got married, built a career, and none of it lasted. Her marriage failed. Her happiness failed. She's back in Springfield, back to the same problems, just older and more defeated. The pattern holds across every possible timeline. Here's where it gets really disturbing. The show presents multiple different futures that contradict each other in details, but agree on one thing. Lisa fails, the specifics change, but the outcome stays the same. In some futures she's married, in others divorced. In some she's president, in others she's struggling professionally, but in every single version, she's unhappy and unsuccessful in the ways that matter to her. Her dreams don't come true. Her potential doesn't manifest. Her intelligence doesn't save her. Compare this to Bart's future episodes. Bart gets varied outcomes. Sometimes he's successful, sometimes he's not. Sometimes he's happy, sometimes he's miserable. His future changes based on the episode's needs. Same with Homer, Marge, even Maggie. Their flash forwards show different possibilities, but Lisa's futures are consistently tragic. The universe seems determined to crush her specifically. Think about what this means for Lisa as a child. She's 8 years old, working incredibly hard, sacrificing her childhood to study and prepare for a better future. She plays saxophone alone in her room. She does extra homework. She enters academic competitions. She stays up late reading. She builds her entire identity around the idea that intelligence and hard work will let her escape Springfield's dysfunction. But if the future is predetermined, then every sacrifice is pointless. Every hour spent studying is wasted. Every dream she builds is already destroyed. The really tragic part is that Lisa might actually sense this on some level. Her depression throughout the series isn't just about being a smart kid in a dumb family. It's deeper than that. She shows signs of existential despair that's unusual for an 8-year-old. She has moments where she seems to understand that nothing she does will matter. Her vegetarianism, her activism, her academic achievement, they all have this desperate quality, like she's trying to prove something to herself more than actually believing it will work. Look at how the other characters treat Lisa's ambitions. Homer consistently forgets about her dreams. Marge supports her, but can't protect her from the family's dysfunction. Bart actively sabotages her. The town ignores her. Springfield itself seems designed to drag down anyone trying to escape. And Lisa's smart enough to see all of this clearly. She understands that the system is rigged against her, but she keeps trying anyway, because what else can she do? What makes this pattern most disturbing is how consistent it is across 30-plus years of the show. Different writers, different episodes, different decades of production, but Lisa's doomed future remains constant. That suggests something intentional in how the character is conceived. Lisa represents the tragedy of wasted potential. She's proof that intelligence and hard work aren't enough to overcome circumstance and family dysfunction. The show uses her to demonstrate that some people are simply born into situations they can't escape, no matter how hard they try. Her saxophone becomes really symbolic when you think about it this way. She plays beautifully, expressing emotions she can't articulate otherwise. But saxophone isn't a popular instrument. It doesn't lead to fame or success. It's solitary, melancholic, the sound of isolation and yearning. Lisa chose the perfect instrument for someone whose talent will never be properly recognized or rewarded. She's playing her own dirge, mourning a future that's already dead. The educational system fails her too. Springfield Elementary is so bad that even a genius like Lisa can barely learn anything useful. Miss Hoover is apathetic. Principal Skinner is incompetent. The other students resent her intelligence instead of being inspired by it. She's trying to get educated in a system designed to produce mediocrity. Her only hope is escaping to college, but future drama shows how even that opportunity can be stolen from her at the last moment. The most heartbreaking possibility is that Lisa knows her future is doomed and keeps trying anyway. Not because she believes she can change it, but because giving up would mean admitting her entire identity is built on false hope. She can't stop being the smart, ambitious Simpson without losing herself completely. So she keeps studying, keeps planning, keeps dreaming, knowing deep down that none of it will matter. She's trapped in a performance of hope while understanding it's futile. Every time she wins a small victory, like acing a test or winning an academic competition, it just makes the ultimate failure more painful. The show gives her these moments to hurt her worse later. She gets to taste success just enough to understand what she's losing. That's crueler than never succeeding at all. The really dark implication is that Lisa's suffering might be necessary for the family's survival. Her intelligence makes her the family's conscience, the one who sees problems clearly and tries to fix them. If she escaped Springfield and built her own successful life, the family would lose that stabilizing force. Maybe the universe keeps her trapped because the Simpsons need her more than she needs her own happiness. Her dreams get sacrificed for their dysfunction. Her potential gets wasted keeping them functional. Lisa is not just smart. She's smart enough to see her own cage, understand why she can't escape it, and recognize that all her efforts to break free are futile, but she keeps trying anyway because the alternative is despair. That's not just a sad future, that's a character living in constant existential horror, trapped by fate and family in equal measure. Moving on to Moe's suicide attempt pattern. Moe might be documenting real suicide attempts disguised as dark comedy. Moe makes references to trying to kill himself constantly throughout the series, but when you actually count them and look at the context, something really dark emerges. The frequency is what hits you first. Moe casually mentions suicide attempts in dozens of episodes across 30 years. He talks about hanging himself, taking pills, jumping off buildings, shooting himself. These aren't vague depression references. They're specific method descriptions that suggest real attempts. In Dumbbell Indemnity, we actually see Moe try to hang himself on screen after a failed insurance fraud scheme. He ties the noose, kicks away the chair, and only survives because Homer interrupts. That's not a joke setup. That's showing an actual suicide attempt that would have succeeded. His rag-on-a-stick suicide prevention hotline reveals how often he thinks about this. Moe runs a hotline specifically for people considering suicide, which suggests he's intimately familiar with the psychology. But the calls he receives mirror his own thoughts. He's basically counseling himself through other people's crises. When callers describe their reasons for wanting to die, Moe relates to every single one. Loneliness, failure, lack of purpose. These aren't abstract problems to him. They're his daily reality. Look at the Christmas episodes. Multiple times we see Moe alone in his bar on Christmas Eve, closing up with no plans, no family, nobody expecting him anywhere. Flaming Moe's shows him ready to light himself on fire before Homer shows up with the drink recipe that temporarily saves his business. The episode treats it like comedy, but pause on what's actually happening. Moe has matches and accelerant ready. He's prepared to burn himself to death in his empty bar because business is bad and he's alone on Christmas. The phone call pattern is another red flag. Characters frequently call Moe's Tavern looking for joke names, and Moe falls for it every time. But watch his emotional state when this happens. He gets genuinely upset, genuinely hurt, and the pranks compound his sense of worthlessness. Bart torments him for years with these calls, never considering that he's psychologically attacking someone who's already on the edge. Each prank call becomes another piece of evidence that Moe is a joke, that his life is meaningless, that even children see him as a target for mockery. His failed relationships show a pattern of self-sabotage that looks like someone who doesn't believe he deserves happiness. In the Springfield Files, Moe briefly dates a woman and immediately starts planning their future. She leaves him almost instantly. In Eeny Teeny Maya Moe, he dates a little person who seems genuinely interested in him, and he ruins it through insecurity and jealousy. Every time he gets close to connection, he destroys it because deep down he believes he's unlovable. That's textbook depression behavior. Think about how casually other characters treat Moe's suicide references. Homer hears Moe talk about killing himself and just laughs or changes the subject. Barney witnesses Moe's despair daily and does nothing. The bar regulars hear this man describe his suicidal ideation constantly and treat it as background noise. Nobody intervenes, nobody suggests therapy, nobody takes him seriously. Springfield has normalized Moe's suffering to the point where his suicide attempts have become invisible. The really disturbing part is how long this has been going on. Moe's been running that bar for decades, alone, serving people who mock him, surviving on minimal income, with zero social support outside his customers. And his customers aren't friends. They're alcoholics who need his bar to feed their addiction. Moe's entire social circle consists of people who are dependent on him for access to alcohol, not for genuine connection. He's surrounded by people every day and completely isolated. His physical appearance suggests severe neglect. Moe looks rough throughout the series. He's described as ugly by multiple characters, which compounds his isolation. He rarely seems to sleep well. He shows signs of substance abuse. His bar is grimy and poorly maintained, suggesting he's barely keeping his business alive. Everything about Moe's physical presentation screams untreated mental health crisis. The business struggles make it worse. Moe's Tavern barely stays afloat financially. He's constantly dealing with debts, failed schemes to make money, and the reality that his bar is dying slowly. His entire identity is tied to this failing business in a building that's falling apart. When the business struggles, Moe doesn't just face financial ruin. He faces the collapse of the only thing giving his life structure. What makes this pattern most disturbing is the progression over seasons. Early Moe seems bitter, but functional. Later seasons show him becoming more desperate, more explicit about his suicidal thoughts, more isolated. The character is actively deteriorating across decades of episodes. This isn't static depression, it's a slow-motion mental health crisis happening in real time. His attempts at reinvention always fail. Moe tries turning his bar into a trendy nightclub, a restaurant, a hipster hangout. Nothing works. Springfield doesn't want Moe to succeed. The town needs him to stay in his lane as the miserable bartender serving other miserable people. Any attempt to grow or change gets crushed by circumstances or sabotaged by his own psychology. The gun behind the bar takes on darker meaning when you understand Moe's mental state. He keeps a loaded shotgun within easy reach at all times, for protection supposedly. But for someone with documented suicidal ideation, having constant access to a firearm is incredibly dangerous. That gun isn't just for robbers. It's there if Moe decides tonight is the night he can't take it anymore. Compare Moe's treatment to how the show handles other characters' mental health. When Homer gets depressed, the family rallies around him. When Lisa faces existential crisis, people notice and try to help. But Moe's been screaming for help for 30 years and nobody hears him. His suffering is treated as a character quirk instead of a medical emergency. The show mines his pain for laughs while depicting genuine suicidal behavior. The scariest part is that Moe keeps running a bar full of people who witness his pain daily and do nothing. He's dying slowly in public, and everyone's too uncomfortable to intervene. His suicide attempts have become so normalized that even explicit cries for help get dismissed as Moe being Moe. He could actually succeed one of these times, and Springfield would probably just find a new bartender. Up next is the Jebediah Springfield dark secret theory. Springfield's founder might have been a violent criminal, and the town's been covering it up for centuries. In Lisa the Iconoclast, Lisa discovers evidence that Jebediah Springfield, the town's beloved founder, was actually a murderous pirate named Hans Sprungfeld who tried to assassinate George Washington. The evidence is pretty damning when you look at it objectively. Lisa finds a confession written by Jebediah himself, hidden inside his secret silver tongue. The document explicitly states that he was Hans Sprungfeld, a vicious pirate who wore the silver tongue to replace one he had bitten off. The confession describes attempted murder of Washington and a life of crime before founding Springfield. This isn't speculation or interpretation. It's a first-hand confession from the founder himself. The town's reaction reveals everything you need to know about Springfield's relationship with truth. When Lisa tries to share her discovery, the entire town turns against her. They don't want to investigate further or verify the evidence. They want to silence her and maintain the comfortable lie they've been telling themselves for generations. Mayor Quimby sees the confession, confirms it's authentic, and still chooses to suppress the truth because the myth is more useful than reality. Think about what this means for Springfield's entire civic identity. Every monument, every holiday, every piece of civic pride is built on celebrating a murderer. The town square has a statue of a man who tried to kill the father of their country. Schools teach children to admire a pirate who changed his name and created a fake heroic backstory. The town's foundational story is propaganda designed to hide violent criminal origins. The cover-up gets even more sinister when you realize how systematic it is. The Historical Society actively maintains false records. Town leaders know the truth and choose deception. The confession exists and is hidden away rather than displayed. This isn't accidental historical ignorance. It's deliberate, coordinated suppression of truth across multiple institutions and generations. What's really disturbing is why they maintain the lie. Jebediah's heroic image serves the town's needs better than the truth. A noble founder gives Springfield legitimacy and civic pride. A murderous pirate founder makes the town look like it was built by criminals and liars. So they choose the useful fiction over uncomfortable reality. The town's identity matters more than honesty. Look at how they treat Lisa when she threatens to expose the truth. The mayor threatens her. The Historical Society turns against her. Her own family doubts her. The entire town mobilizes to protect a lie that makes them feel good about themselves. They're willing to destroy a child's reputation and credibility to maintain a false narrative about their history. The Historical Society's role is particularly revealing. They're supposedly dedicated to preserving and sharing accurate history. But when confronted with historical evidence that contradicts the official narrative, they immediately work to suppress it. Their job isn't actually preserving truth, it's maintaining approved mythology. They're propaganda ministers disguised as historians. Jebediah's silver tongue becomes a perfect symbol for Springfield itself. He hid his true nature behind a prosthetic that made him look normal and respectable. Springfield does the same thing, hiding its violent criminal origins behind monuments and ceremonies that make the town seem wholesome. Both the man and the town he founded are built on false fronts covering dark reality. The attempted assassination of George Washington is especially significant. If Jebediah succeeded, he would have changed the course of American history. The founder of Springfield literally tried to destroy the founding of America. That's the man the town celebrates. They're honoring someone who attempted to prevent the country from existing. The irony is so dark, it's almost absurd. Think about how this pattern extends beyond just Jebediah. If the town's founder was a lying criminal, and the town actively maintains that lie, what does that say about Springfield's entire culture? The corruption and dysfunction we see throughout the series isn't a deviation from the town's values. It's a continuation of them. Springfield was founded on deception and violence, and it's maintained those characteristics for 200 years. The confession document proves that Jebediah was aware of his own deception. He wrote down the truth and hid it away, suggesting some guilt or need to confess even if he couldn't do it publicly. But the town has less moral awareness than their criminal founder. At least Jebediah documented the truth for future discovery. Springfield actively works to keep it hidden even after it's been found. Mayor Quimby's role shows how political leadership perpetuates historical lies. He has the power to set the record straight and chooses not to because the lie is politically useful. Honesty would require admitting the town's entire identity is false. That's too uncomfortable, too complicated, too damaging to civic morale. So he opts for comfortable deception over difficult truth. The episode's resolution makes it even worse. Lisa ultimately chooses not to reveal the truth because she sees how much the town needs the lie. She decides that destroying people's faith in Jebediah would cause more harm than good. So she becomes complicit in the cover-up. Even the character who discovers the truth ends up helping to maintain it. The cycle continues. What makes this genuinely sinister is that Springfield actively chooses to maintain the lie even after knowing the truth. This isn't ignorance, it's willful historical revision. Everyone becomes complicit in the cover-up because facing reality is too uncomfortable. The town would rather celebrate a murderer than admit they've been wrong for 2 centuries. The historical records have probably been altered multiple times over the years. Every generation discovers the truth, decides the lie is more useful, and helps maintain the deception for the next generation. This pattern of coordinated dishonesty becomes the real tradition Springfield passes down, not the fake heroic stories about Jebediah. Think about all the children who grow up learning false history, idolizing a criminal, internalizing propaganda as truth. Their entire understanding of their town's identity is based on lies that adults knowingly teach them. That's institutional deception on a massive scale, infecting every new generation with false consciousness about their own origins. Springfield's entire civic calendar celebrates this lie. Jebediah Springfield Day, the bicentennial celebrations, all the monuments and ceremonies, they're all honoring fiction. The town spends resources and time maintaining an elaborate false narrative instead of confronting uncomfortable historical reality. That's a society-wide commitment to deception. The really dark possibility is that other towns know Springfield's true history, and Springfield doesn't realize they know. Shelbyville, Capital City, other neighboring communities might be aware that Springfield was founded by a criminal, and they're just polite enough not to mention it. Springfield's desperate maintenance of the lie might be obvious to outsiders who let them keep pretending. Now let's talk about Krusty's broken psychology theory. Krusty might be trapped in an endless cycle of self-destruction because of childhood trauma he's never processed. Like Father, Like Clown shows us exactly where Krusty's psychology broke, and every destructive choice he makes traces back to that wound. His father, Rabbi Hyman Kristofsky, rejected him for wanting to become a comedian instead of following in his footsteps as a rabbi. This wasn't gentle disappointment, it was complete rejection of Krusty's identity. The rabbi literally disowned his son for choosing entertainment over religion. That kind of parental rejection during childhood creates psychological damage that never fully heals without serious intervention. Think about what this rejection did to young Krusty. He was a child trying to make his father laugh, using the one talent he had. And his father responded by cutting him out of his life completely. The message Krusty internalized was clear. Being himself meant losing his father's love, so he had to choose between authentic self-expression and family connection. He chose himself, but he never stopped suffering from that choice. The pattern of addiction throughout the series shows someone trying to numb pain that won't go away. Krusty gambles compulsively, loses fortunes, and keeps gambling. He uses cocaine, mentions it casually in multiple episodes. He smokes heavily despite health problems. He drinks excessively. These aren't recreational vices, they're coping mechanisms for someone who's trying to not feel something. His multiple financial ruin cycles reveal self-sabotage patterns. Krusty makes millions, then loses everything through gambling or bad business decisions, then claws his way back, then loses it all again. Someone who wanted financial security would learn from the first disaster. Krusty keeps repeating the pattern because on some level he believes he doesn't deserve success or stability. His father told him he was making the wrong life choice, and some part of Krusty keeps proving his father right by destroying everything good that comes from that choice. Look at his failed comeback specials. Krusty attempts comebacks constantly throughout the series, and they always implode. The comeback special with the Fox network that fails. The return to basics special that bombs. The various TV movies that get terrible reviews. He's talented enough to succeed, but he sabotages himself every time right when success becomes real. It's like he can't handle actually winning, because winning would mean his father was wrong to reject him, and accepting that is too painful. His relationship with his daughter Sophie shows how the trauma perpetuates. When Krusty meets his daughter from a one-night stand, he's initially excited about having family connection again. Then he immediately becomes an absent, unreliable father. He's repeating the pattern of abandonment that his father taught him, but in reverse. Instead of being the abandoned child, he's become the abandoning parent. The cycle continues, the physical toll is obvious. Krusty has multiple heart attacks throughout the series. He's overweight from poor diet and excessive drinking. He looks older than his actual age. His body is breaking down from decades of substance abuse and stress, but he doesn't change his behavior because the self-destruction is the point. He's slowly killing himself through lifestyle choices, and everyone just watches it happen. Think about his comedy itself. Krusty's act hasn't evolved in decades. He's still doing the same bits, the same pratfalls, the same jokes that worked when he was young. He's frozen in the moment when comedy made him choose between his father and himself. He can't move forward because moving forward would mean leaving that moment behind, and that moment is the defining trauma of his life. His relationships with women follow the same self-sabotage pattern. Krusty dates or marries multiple women throughout the series, and every relationship fails. He proposes to Penelope, gets left at the altar. He dates Lindsay Nagel. It doesn't work out. He can't maintain intimacy because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means risking rejection like his father rejected him. So he sabotages relationships before they can hurt him. The reconciliation episode with his father should have been healing, but watch what happens after. They reconcile, the rabbi accepts Krusty's career choice, they have this beautiful moment of connection. Then later episodes show Krusty still doing all the same destructive behaviors. The reconciliation didn't fix anything because the damage was already done. You can't unbreak a child's psychology just by apologizing decades later. His exploitation of Bart and Lisa reveals how damaged he really is. Krusty uses those kids for publicity, puts them in danger, breaks promises to them constantly. He's capable of seeing children who genuinely admire him and still treating them like props for his career. That's someone whose empathy has been destroyed by their own pain. He can't connect authentically even with children who worship him. The show within a show aspect is darkly symbolic. Krusty the Clown is a character that Herschel Krustofsky plays. He puts on the clown identity to perform, but the performance has consumed his real identity. He doesn't know who he is outside the clown persona anymore. The mask has become his face. He's trapped in a performance that started as artistic expression and became a prison. His treatment of Sideshow Mel and other employees shows casual cruelty that suggests deep resentment. Krusty abuses his staff, doesn't pay them properly, puts them in dangerous situations for bits. He's recreating the power dynamic from his childhood, but casting himself as the authority figure who rejects and hurts others. It's trauma repetition as workplace abuse. The suicide attempt references are subtle but there. Multiple episodes show Krusty in situations where he's risking his life recklessly or expressing desire to not exist. The heart attacks could be read as his body trying to escape a life his mind can't leave. He's dying slowly from the inside out, poisoned by unprocessed trauma and self-medication. What's really heartbreaking is that Krusty has money, fame, influence, all the external markers of success, but none of it makes him happy because he never got the one thing he actually needed: unconditional acceptance from his father when he was young enough for it to shape his psychology in healthy ways. Now it's too late. The damage is permanent. He's rich and famous and miserable, destroying himself slowly while entertaining millions. The generational trauma aspect makes it even darker. Krusty's father was probably dealing with his own pain from his religious upbringing and transferred it to Krusty. Krusty then transfers his pain to everyone around him, including his own daughter. The cycle of hurt keeps moving through generations, each person wounded by the last, unable to break the pattern without serious psychological intervention that none of them ever get. Moving forward, we have Maggie's hidden intelligence and awareness theory. Maggie might be the smartest Simpson, and her silence might be a choice, not a limitation. The evidence for this starts with Who Shot Mr. Burns, where Maggie deliberately shoots Mr. Burns after he steals her pacifier and blocks sunlight from her daycare. That's not random baby violence, that's planned revenge from someone who understands cause and effect, holds grudges, and can execute complex plans. The shooting itself shows sophisticated thinking. Maggie had to understand that Burns was responsible for the daycare problem, find access to the gun, learn how to fire it, wait for the right moment, and successfully shoot him. Babies don't do that. Babies don't understand revenge, they don't plan attacks, they don't successfully execute complex actions requiring hand-eye coordination and timing. Maggie does all of this while everyone assumes she's just a normal infant. Her spelling abilities appear in multiple episodes. In Gone Maggie, Gone, she shows she can read and write. Other episodes show her solving puzzles that require literacy and logical thinking. She understands complex instructions and follows them accurately. But she never speaks. She never reveals to her family that she has these capabilities. She deliberately maintains the illusion of being a normal baby while possessing much more advanced cognitive abilities. Think about what this means. Maggie's making a conscious choice to stay silent. She could talk, she could communicate her intelligence to her family, but she chooses not to. Why? What would she lose by revealing herself? What strategic advantage does silence give her? The Treehouse of Horror episodes show what Maggie is capable of when the normal rules are suspended. In these horror parodies, Maggie is often the most dangerous character. She's killed people, shown strategic thinking, demonstrated physical abilities beyond normal infants. The show treats these as non-canon horror jokes, but what if they're revealing her true capabilities that she hides the rest of the time? Her facial expressions throughout the series show awareness that infants shouldn't have. Watch Maggie's reactions to family events. She's not just responding emotionally like a baby would. She's observing, analyzing, judging. Her eyes track conversations like she's understanding the content and implications. She reacts to subtle social cues that babies typically don't notice. Compare Maggie's behavior to actual infant development. Real babies her age are learning basic motor skills and emotional recognition. They're not solving complex problems, understanding social dynamics, or planning revenge attacks. Maggie does all of this while maintaining perfect cover as a normal baby. That requires sophisticated understanding of what normal babies do and conscious effort to mimic that behavior while hiding her real capabilities. Her pacifier becomes symbolic of her chosen silence. She could speak but keeps the pacifier in her mouth as a physical barrier to speech. When the pacifier is removed, like in episodes where she temporarily loses it, she still doesn't speak. The pacifier isn't the reason she's silent. It's a symbol of her choice to remain silent, a prop in her performance of being a normal baby. The family's treatment of Maggie suggests they have no idea what she really is. Homer frequently forgets about her existence. Marge treats her like a normal baby. Bart and Lisa occasionally interact with her, but don't recognize her intelligence. The family's obliviousness might be exactly what Maggie wants. If they knew how smart she was, they'd have expectations. They'd treat her differently. Silence keeps her free from demands and responsibilities. Think about what Maggie witnesses every day. She sees her family's complete dysfunction up close. Homer's stupidity and violence, Marge's enabling and suppressed resentment, Bart's cruelty, Lisa's suffering. She watches all of this from her position as an invisible observer, understanding everything but saying nothing. What must that awareness do to her psychology? Her ability to escape from daycare and navigate Springfield alone in several episodes shows spatial reasoning and problem-solving abilities far beyond infant development. She can plan routes, avoid dangers, and reach specific destinations. This requires map-like mental representation of the city and goal-directed behavior. Babies don't have these capabilities. Maggie does, and she uses them while maintaining her cover. The recurring gag of Maggie falling when Homer slams on the brakes might be strategic. She could probably brace herself, but chooses not to because doing so would reveal her awareness and physical capabilities. The fall is part of her performance as a helpless baby. Every instance is a conscious choice to maintain her disguise. What's really disturbing is considering what Maggie might know that the rest of the family doesn't. Babies are present for adult conversations that no one bothers to censor because they assume babies don't understand. Maggie has been in the room for every private conversation, every secret, every honest moment the family has had, while thinking she couldn't comprehend. She knows everything. Her relationship with the other babies at daycare could be revealing. Are the other babies also more intelligent than they appear? Is there a whole community of hyper-intelligent infants silently observing the world? Or is Maggie unique, isolated in her awareness, unable to connect with anyone because revealing herself means losing her protected status? The violent tendencies she shows, particularly the Burns shooting, suggest she might be genuinely dangerous. She has the intelligence to plan attacks, the motor skills to execute them, and the emotional capacity to want revenge. She's armed with knowledge about her family's vulnerabilities, and she's watching everything. If she ever decided the family was a threat to her, she'd know exactly how to destroy them. Her silence might also be protective. Maybe Maggie saw something early in her development that showed her speaking would be dangerous. Maybe she witnessed how the family treats Lisa's intelligence and decided it was safer to play dumb. Or maybe she understands that her parents can barely handle 3 children, and revealing that the baby is actually a genius would break them completely. The most chilling possibility is that Maggie is documenting everything. Her intelligence and observational skills mean she could be building a complete understanding of her family, Springfield, and the world around her. When she finally does speak, she'll have years of observations and analysis ready. She won't be a normal child starting to communicate. She'll be someone who's been gathering data silently for years, ready to reveal everything she's learned. Think about the first word Maggie speaks in the series' future episodes. In some flash-forwards, she speaks normally. In others, her first word is Daddy. The show treats this as a sweet moment, but if Maggie is as intelligent as the evidence suggests, that first word is a strategic choice. She's deciding when to end her silence based on when it serves her purposes, not when she becomes developmentally capable of speech. The really dark question is why she shot Burns specifically. Yes, he took her pacifier and closed the daycare, but that's a pretty extreme response for those offenses, unless Maggie understood the broader implications. Maybe she recognized Burns as a threat to Springfield. Maybe she was attempting to kill him as a public service. Maybe she understood that Burns' evil was harming people and decided to take action while knowing she wouldn't face consequences because babies can't be prosecuted for murder. Now let's talk about the Springfield nuclear plant's real purpose theory. The nuclear plant might not just be dangerously run, it might be deliberately exposing workers to radiation as part of secret experiments. The evidence starts with Blinky, the 3-eyed fish found in waters near the plant. That's not natural mutation, that's radiation damage so severe it's causing genetic abnormalities in multiple generations of aquatic life. Think about what it takes to create mutations like Blinky. You need sustained, heavy radiation exposure to water systems over years. The plant is pumping out enough radioactive contamination to genetically alter entire fish populations. That level of environmental damage doesn't happen accidentally. That's systematic poisoning of the ecosystem. Look at the worker health patterns. Multiple plant employees show signs of radiation sickness throughout the series. Workers mention health problems, tumors, glowing skin. Homer literally glows green from radiation exposure in several episodes. His body has absorbed so much radiation that it emits visible light. The dosage required for that is lethal, multiple times over for normal humans. But the plant keeps operating, keeps exposing workers, and nobody shuts it down. Burns' knowledge of the contamination is obvious. He knows the plant is poisoning people. He knows the safety violations. He knows workers are being exposed to lethal doses of radiation, and he doesn't care. In multiple episodes, he actively suppresses safety reports and bribes inspectors to ignore violations. This isn't negligence, it's deliberate harm. The secret basement facilities are another massive red flag. Several episodes reference mysterious lower levels of the plant that regular employees don't access. What's down there? What kind of equipment or experiments require that level of secrecy? The plant's public function is generating power, but these hidden areas suggest additional purposes that aren't disclosed. Smithers' role in the cover-up shows coordinated conspiracy. He's not just enabling Burns' general evil. He's specifically helping suppress evidence of radiation exposure, paying off victims, destroying safety reports. This is systematic cover-up of what looks like human experimentation. Smithers handles the logistics of hiding evidence that workers are being poisoned. The government inspectors' behavior is deeply suspicious. They visit the plant regularly, see obvious safety violations, and always clear it to keep operating. Multiple episodes show inspectors finding major problems and then being bribed or threatened into approving the plant anyway. That's not isolated corruption, that's coordinated government protection of whatever the plant is really doing. Think about Homer's specific exposure levels. He's directly exposed to reactor cores, handles radioactive rods with his bare hands, sleeps next to radioactive materials. His job is safety inspector, but he's in constant contact with radiation that should kill him within days. The fact that he survives suggests either he's being monitored as part of an experiment, or his unique biology makes him an interesting test subject. The plant's location next to Springfield Elementary is especially sinister. Why build a dangerously radioactive facility directly adjacent to a school full of children? Children are more vulnerable to radiation damage. Their developing bodies absorb radiation differently. If you were running experiments on radiation's effects across different age groups, a school next to your plant would give you a perfect population to monitor. Look at Springfield's overall cancer rates. Multiple characters throughout the series mention cancer, tumors, unexplained illnesses. For a small town, Springfield has an unusually high incidence of serious health problems. The plant's radiation contamination is affecting the entire community's health, not just workers. This looks like population-wide exposure being monitored for results. The three-eyed fish keeps appearing throughout the series, showing the contamination is ongoing and worsening. Each new appearance of mutated wildlife proves the plant continues pumping radiation into the environment at levels that cause genetic damage, but instead of being shut down, the plant just keeps operating. Why would authorities allow this to continue unless they want the contamination to continue? Mr. Burns' own health is relevant here. He's impossibly old and survives multiple attempts on his life despite being physically frail. What if he's been exposed to radiation for so long that it's somehow preserving him? What if the plant's actual purpose is studying how radiation affects longevity, and Burns is the oldest test subject? His survival defies medical explanation unless something unusual is keeping him alive. The employee's inability to quit or report problems suggests coercion beyond normal corporate pressure. Multiple episodes show workers who want to leave the plant but can't. They're trapped somehow, forced to continue working in radiation-contaminated environments even though they know it's killing them. What kind of leverage does Burns have over these people? Are they being blackmailed, threatened, or are they part of an agreement they can't back out of? Think about the hiring practices. The plant employs obviously unqualified people in critical safety positions. Homer, for instance, is spectacularly incompetent and yet remains safety inspector for decades. Why would a nuclear plant keep dangerous employees unless their incompetence serves a purpose? Maybe incompetent workers are less likely to notice or report the real experiments happening around them. The plant's design seems intentionally unsafe. Multiple episodes show the facility lacks basic safety features that nuclear plants normally have. Alarms don't work properly, containment protocols are ignored, safety equipment is missing or defective. This isn't cost-cutting. This is deliberate design to maximize exposure while maintaining plausible deniability. Radiation isn't the only hazard. The plant dumps toxic waste, chemical contaminants, and other pollutants into Springfield's environment. The town's water supply, air quality, and soil are all contaminated. The plant is running a comprehensive environmental poisoning program affecting multiple exposure routes. That's not accident, that's methodical contamination. The most disturbing possibility is government complicity at the federal level. Nuclear plants are heavily regulated by federal authorities. The NRC, EPA, and other agencies monitor nuclear facilities constantly. For Springfield nuclear plant to operate with such obvious violations means federal regulators are either incompetent across multiple agencies or they're deliberately allowing it. The second option suggests Springfield might be a designated testing site for studying radiation effects on a population. Burns isn't just a bad boss running a dangerous facility. He might be running a sanctioned human experiment with federal protection. Every mutated animal, every worker illness, every cancer case becomes data, points in a study that no one will ever acknowledge exists. The plant's real purpose isn't generating power. It's generating medical data about long-term radiation exposure on human populations, using an entire town as test subjects without their knowledge or consent. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Bart might not just be a troublemaker. He might be developing actual sociopathic traits that get worse over time. The warning signs are all there if you look at his behavior patterns across 30 seasons and take them seriously instead of treating them as comedy. Start with the empathy problems. Normal kids feel bad after hurting someone. They show remorse when their actions cause pain. Bart doesn't. In countless episodes, he causes serious harm to others and shows no genuine regret. He might face consequences and say he's sorry, but watch his face. He's not actually feeling guilt. He's performing remorse because it's expected, not because he feels it internally. The escalation pattern is what makes it really concerning. Early seasons show Bart doing typical kid pranks, skateboarding where he shouldn't, disrupting class, pulling harmless tricks. But as the series progresses, his behavior gets darker. He starts doing things that cause real psychological damage to people. The pranks stop being mischief and start being cruelty. Look at what he does to Principal Skinner. Bart doesn't just annoy Skinner. He systematically torments a man with PTSD from Vietnam. In The Principal and the Pauper, Bart's behavior contributes to Skinner's complete psychological breakdown. He takes pleasure in making a traumatized war veteran relive his worst experiences. That's not a prank. That's psychological torture of a vulnerable person. His treatment of Lisa goes beyond sibling rivalry. Bart doesn't just compete with Lisa or tease her. He actively tries to ruin her happiness. When Lisa is excited about something, Bart finds ways to destroy it. When she's sad, he makes it worse. When she achieves something, he sabotages it. This is strategic emotional abuse of someone he's supposed to care about as family. The Boys of Bummer reveals how dangerous Bart's behavior can be. His constant bullying of a kid who made an error in a baseball game drives that child to attempt suicide. Bart sees someone in genuine distress and keeps pushing until they want to die. When the kid tries to hang himself, Bart is directly responsible. The episode treats this as Bart learning a lesson, but the fact that he pushed someone that far shows sociopathic lack of empathy. His manipulation skills are highly developed. Bart knows exactly how to read people's weaknesses and exploit them. He can predict how others will react to his provocations and uses this to control situations. In multiple episodes, he plays family members against each other, manufactures conflicts for his entertainment, and manipulates adults into doing what he wants. That's sophisticated psychological manipulation from a 10-year-old. Think about the prank calls to Moe. On surface level, they're funny jokes, but Bart is systematically harassing a man with severe depression and suicidal ideation. He calls Moe dozens of times over years, humiliating him publicly in his own bar, chipping away at an already fragile psyche. Bart knows Moe is miserable, but continues the torment because Moe's pain entertains him. That's sadism. His lack of fear about consequences is another warning sign. Sociopaths don't properly process potential negative outcomes of their behavior. Bart repeatedly does things that could seriously hurt him or others without showing appropriate caution. He's not brave. He's unable to properly assess risk because his emotional processing doesn't work like normal people's. The way Bart reacts when he actually faces consequences is revealing. When he's caught and punished, he doesn't feel guilty about the harm he caused. He feels angry about being caught and resentful about the punishment. His focus is on avoiding future consequences, not on not hurting people. That's sociopathic thinking. His relationship with authority shows complete disrespect for social rules. Sociopaths don't internalize social norms. They learn to perform compliance when necessary, but don't actually believe rules apply to them. Bart sees authority figures as obstacles to overcome, not legitimate sources of guidance. Teachers, parents, police, all just targets for manipulation. Watch how Bart treats animals. Several episodes show him being cruel to animals without remorse. He doesn't torture them systematically like a future serial killer, but he shows callous disregard for animal suffering that normal children wouldn't display. When animals are hurt because of him, he doesn't care beyond inconvenience to himself. His enjoyment of others' suffering is consistent and specific. When people experience pain or humiliation, Bart laughs. When his pranks cause genuine distress, he's pleased with himself. He seeks out opportunities to cause suffering and then savors the results. That's not normal childish cruelty. That's getting emotional gratification from others' pain. The complete absence of genuine remorse across hundreds of episodes is damning. Bart says he's sorry when forced to, but he never actually changes his behavior based on understanding he hurt someone. He doesn't have the internal emotional experience of guilt that would drive behavioral change. He's learned to mimic guilt socially without actually feeling it. His intelligence makes it worse. Bart isn't stupid. He's actually quite clever when motivated. He could use his intelligence for positive purposes, but chooses to use it for manipulation and harm. He understands human psychology well enough to exploit people systematically. Combined with lack of empathy, that intelligence becomes a tool for more effective cruelty. Think about his future in flash-forward episodes. Multiple possible futures show adult Bart as unemployed, criminal, or otherwise dysfunctional. The episodes treat this as him being a slacker. But what if it's showing someone whose sociopathic traits prevented him from forming the relationships and work ethic needed for adult success? Sociopaths often struggle with long-term employment and relationships because they can't maintain the emotional connections these require. The family's normalization of his behavior is enabling his development. Homer strangles Bart but never actually addresses the underlying psychological issues. Marge makes excuses for him. They treat his cruelty as a phase he'll grow out of, but sociopathic traits don't just disappear. They develop. The warning signs everyone ignores in childhood become full-blown personality disorders in adulthood. What's really terrifying is that everyone treats Bart's behavior as cute mischief that he'll grow out of. But sociopathic traits don't just disappear, they develop and sophisticate. The 10-year-old who takes pleasure in others' pain becomes the adult who lacks empathy and conscience. Bart isn't just a troublemaker. He's showing early indicators of someone who could become genuinely dangerous, and no one's taking it seriously enough to intervene before it's too late. Up next is Ned Flanders' repressed rage theory. Ned Flanders might be one breakdown away from something violent, and his extreme religiosity is barely containing it. Hurricane Nettie reveals exactly how unstable Ned really is, and why his niceness is actually concerning when you understand what's underneath. The episode shows us Ned's childhood, and it's horrifying. His parents were beatniks who refused to discipline him at all. Young Ned was completely out of control, violent, aggressive, screaming constantly. His behavior was so extreme that his parents took him to Dr. Foster for treatment, and Dr. Foster's solution was 8 months of continuous spanking, 8 months of non-stop corporal punishment to condition Ned into suppressing every negative emotion. Think about what that does to a child's psychology. You don't cure anger by beating it out of someone. You just teach them to fear their own emotions so much that they bury them completely. Ned wasn't healed. He was traumatized into repression. His entire personality is constructed on top of rage that he's been trained to never express or acknowledge. The breakdown itself shows what happens when that repression cracks. When Ned's house is destroyed by the hurricane and the neighbors rebuild it terribly, he finally snaps. The explosion is spectacular. He screams at everyone, calls them out individually for their flaws, says things he's clearly been thinking for years but never expressed. The real Ned comes out and he's furious, bitter, and judgmental. But here's what's really disturbing. The breakdown isn't the concerning part. It's how fast he gets put back together. Dr. Foster's solution is the same as before. More behavioral conditioning to suppress the rage again. They don't address the underlying anger. They don't help Ned process his legitimate feelings. They just teach him to bottle them up again until the next inevitable explosion. Look at the pattern across the series. Ned has multiple breakdown episodes where his repression fails. Each time, he expresses intense rage, before being pushed back into his nice guy persona. These aren't isolated incidents. They're recurring system failures where the psychological pressure becomes too much and he temporarily loses control. And each time, instead of being addressed, the rage gets stuffed back down. His extreme religiosity functions as a control mechanism for his anger. Ned uses Christianity as a framework to justify his constant self-suppression. Every time he feels anger, he interprets it as sin that needs to be prayed away. His faith isn't bringing him peace, it's just another tool for repressing emotions that are going to explode eventually. Think about how Ned responds to Homer. Homer is objectively terrible to Ned. He borrows tools and never returns them. He insults Ned constantly. He takes advantage of Ned's kindness while giving nothing back. Ned endures all of this with a smile, because expressing anger would mean acknowledging the rage underneath. But you can see it in his eyes sometimes. He's furious at Homer, and he's forcing himself to smile through it. The aftermath of Maud's death reveals more instability. Ned loses his wife in a stupid accident, and his response is to maintain his faith and niceness with even more intensity. He doesn't properly grieve. He doesn't express the rage he must feel at God for taking his wife in such a meaningless way. He doubles down on repression, which means the pressure just keeps building. His parenting shows how the repression transfers to the next generation. Rod and Todd are being raised in the same emotional suppression system that damaged their father. Ned is teaching his children that negative emotions are sinful and must be hidden. He's creating another generation of repressed, psychologically unstable Flanders who will eventually face their own breakdowns. Watch how Ned reacts when his beliefs are challenged. He becomes agitated, defensive, sometimes aggressive. His faith isn't coming from genuine spiritual peace. It's coming from desperate need to maintain the control system that keeps his rage contained. Anyone who threatens that system threatens his ability to stay stable. The Neddy doesn't knock incident shows how his niceness masks boundary violations. Ned constantly invades the Simpsons' privacy, shows up uninvited, inserts himself into their lives. He frames this as neighborly kindness, but it's actually controlling behavior. He needs to be involved in everything to maintain his identity as the helpful neighbor, because without that identity, he'd have to confront who he really is underneath. His response to minor frustrations is revealing. When small things go wrong, Ned's reaction is disproportionate internal distress that he forces himself to smile through. You can see the effort it takes for him to maintain composure over trivial problems. Someone who's genuinely at peace doesn't struggle that hard with small irritations. Think about the business ventures. Ned runs the Leftorium, a store for left-handed people. It barely stays in business and causes him constant financial stress. But he maintains it because giving up would be admitting failure, and his identity can't handle that. He forces himself to sustain in failing business rather than acknowledge reality, just like he forces himself to sustain his failing emotional control system. His physical reactions to stress show the body keeping score. Ned has tension headaches, stress-related health issues, trouble sleeping. His body is manifesting the psychological pressure he won't consciously acknowledge. The repression isn't just mental, it's physically damaging him. The really scary part is what happens when repression finally fails completely. Ned has had small explosions, controlled breakdowns where he vents rage and then gets pushed back into repression. But each cycle leaves him more unstable. The pressure keeps building. Eventually there will be a breakdown that can't be controlled or fixed with more conditioning. And when that happens, decades of suppressed rage is going to come out all at once. His weapons collection is deeply concerning in this context. Ned owns guns and keeps them in his house. For someone with documented rage issues who uses religion to maintain control, having easy access to firearms is dangerous. If his control system completely failed during a breakdown, he'd have the means to act on rage that's been building for 40 years. What makes Ned truly dangerous is that everyone sees him as harmless. His neighbors, his church community, his children, they all think Ned is just a nice guy who occasionally gets stressed. Nobody recognizes that his niceness isn't natural personality. It's constructed control over something violent underneath. When it breaks, and it will break, everyone will be shocked because they never took the warning signs seriously. The 8 months of continuous spanking didn't cure young Ned's rage. It just taught him to fear it and bury it deeper. Every act of forced kindness is Ned running from himself. Every prayer is him begging for strength to keep containing something that can't be contained forever. His entire personality is a dam holding back decades of fury, and dams don't hold forever. When this one breaks, it won't be pretty. Now let's talk about the Springfield time loop theory. Springfield might be stuck in an endless time loop, and the characters might be aware of it on some level. The evidence is everywhere once you start looking at how time works in Springfield compared to normal reality. Nobody ages. That's the obvious starting point. The Simpsons has been on air for over 30 years, but Bart is still 10, Lisa is still 8, and Maggie is still a baby. Characters mention specific years and dates that should mark passage of time, but everyone stays exactly the same age. That's not just cartoon logic. That's time literally not moving forward. Major events get forgotten between episodes. Someone dies, Springfield experiences a catastrophe, huge life changes happen, and the next episode acts like none of it occurred. The continuity resets constantly. Characters gain knowledge or experience significant growth, then revert to their previous state. That's consistent with a time loop that resets back to a specific point. But here's where it gets really disturbing. The flash-forward episodes show multiple different futures that contradict each other. Lisa's wedding, Bart's future, adult Maggie, they all show different and incompatible versions of what happens next. This suggests Springfield isn't on a linear timeline. The town exists in some kind of temporal anomaly where multiple futures are simultaneously possible because time doesn't work normally. Look at the holidays. Christmas happens every year, but it's always the first Christmas the family's experiencing certain things. Halloween returns repeatedly, but characters don't reference previous Halloweens. Birthdays happen, but don't increase age. The calendar moves forward, but time doesn't. That's loop behavior where events recur without progression. The show's meta-commentary is revealing. Characters occasionally break the fourth wall, acknowledge they're in a TV show, or reference the passage of real-world time while they stay the same age. These moments suggest some level of awareness that their reality doesn't work like normal reality. They're trapped in something and they occasionally glimpse that truth. Think about what this means for the characters psychologically. Homer's stupidity could be his mind giving up after repeating the same patterns for decades of subjective experience. How many times can you live through the same events before your brain stops bothering to form real memories? Before you stop trying because nothing ever actually changes? Lisa's depression makes more sense through this lens. She's smart enough to sense that nothing she does will ever matter. She studies constantly, works toward future goals, but the future never arrives. She's trapped in perpetual childhood no matter how much she grows intellectually or emotionally. That awareness would create exactly the kind of existential despair she displays. Maggie's refusal to age is the most literal representation of the loop. She's frozen at the reset point, unable to develop because development requires time, and time has stopped. She might never speak because speaking would require becoming older, and she can't become older without breaking whatever is keeping the loop running. The characters' occasional moments of clarity are chilling. Sometimes someone says something that suggests they remember things that shouldn't be possible if time is linear. Sometimes they reference knowledge they couldn't have unless they've lived through events multiple times. These slips suggest the loop doesn't completely erase memory. Some awareness bleeds through. Look at how casually characters treat impossible situations. Springfield is destroyed and rebuilt constantly. People die and come back. Reality bends in ways that should be shocking, but everyone just accepts it. That acceptance suggests they're used to nothing making sense because they're living in broken time where cause and effect don't work properly. The Treehouse of Horror episodes might be showing realities that exist adjacent to the main loop. The horror versions where everyone dies, where supernatural events occur, where the rules completely break down, these might be other iterations of the loop. different possibilities that exist simultaneously in Springfield's temporal prison. Think about why the loop might exist. What if something catastrophic happened to Springfield, and the loop is preventing that catastrophe from completing? What if the town was destroyed at some point and the loop is the ghost of Springfield, doomed to replay the same period forever because the actual town no longer exists in normal time? The reset mechanism seems to happen between episodes. Each episode starts with the characters back in their default states, previous events largely forgotten. But within episodes, time moves normally. People experience things, make choices, face consequences. The loop doesn't prevent time within episodes. It just prevents time from accumulating across them. This explains why character development never sticks. Homer learns lessons and immediately forgets them. Relationships progress, then reset. Personal growth happens, then vanishes. The loop is designed to return everyone to their starting parameters, preserving Springfield in amber at a specific moment, but the character's underlying psychology is deteriorating across the loop. You can see it if you track emotional states over seasons. They're all getting more damaged, more cynical, more aware that something is fundamentally wrong. The loop preserves their physical ages but can't protect their minds from accumulated experience. The most unsettling possibility is that the family is aware on some subconscious level. Homer's apathy toward his own mortality, Marge's increasing desperation to hold the family together, Bart's escalating behavior, Lisa's deepening depression, Maggie's strategic silence, these might all be responses to awareness they can't consciously process. They're trapped and they know it, but they can't acknowledge it directly without breaking whatever maintains the loop. Springfield itself might be a prison. Not a town that happens to have a time loop, but a construction designed specifically to trap certain people in repeating time. The strange events, the impossible physics, the recurring characters who should have aged or died, all of it maintains the loop's integrity. The outside world might be moving normally while Springfield is frozen. When characters leave town, they might be entering normal time briefly before being pulled back into the loop. That would explain why travel episodes feel different, why external characters who visit Springfield often seem confused or disturbed by what they find there. The saddest part is that escape might be impossible. Even if characters became fully aware of the loop, breaking it might require conditions they can't meet. They're stuck repeating the same period forever, slowly going mad from accumulated awareness that nothing they do will ever lead anywhere. They're not living. They're being preserved in a moment that should have passed decades ago but can't because something broke time in Springfield and no one knows how to fix it. Next up, we have Sideshow Bob's actually justified grievances theory. Sideshow Bob might not be the villain. Bart might have legitimately ruined an innocent man's life. When you actually examine what happened in Krusty Gets Busted and follow the chain of consequences, Bob's revenge attempts start looking justified. Bob's original crime was framing Krusty for armed robbery. That's serious, but let's look at the context. Bob was a talented performer, stuck as a sidekick to a man who humiliated him constantly. Krusty treated Bob like garbage, hit him with pies, made him the butt of jokes, never gave him credit for his contributions to the show. Bob wanted recognition for his talents and saw an opportunity to take Krusty's place. The frame-up itself was relatively bloodless. Bob wore Krusty's costume and robbed the Quickie Mart. Nobody was hurt. It was basically theft and impersonation. A crime, yes, but not a violent one. Bob was trying to steal a career, not destroy lives. Compare that to the consequences he ended up facing. Bart caught Bob through clever detective work, which sounds admirable until you think about what it did to Bob's life. Bob was sent to prison not just for the robbery, but for framing a beloved public figure. The judge was harsh, the sentence was extreme, and Bob's incarceration wasn't just loss of freedom, it was torture. Multiple episodes show that Bob is brutally abused in prison. Other inmates torture him. Guards are sadistic to him. His intelligence and education make him a target. He's repeatedly shown being beaten, humiliated, sexually assaulted. The prison system isn't just punishing Bob, it's destroying him psychologically and physically. all because a 10-year-old kid decided to play detective. Think about Bob's legitimate talents and potential. He's highly educated, loves high culture, can recite Shakespeare, understands classical music, has genuine theatrical ability. Before Bart destroyed his life, Bob had prospects. After prison, he's marked as a felon who can never work in entertainment again. His entire career is dead because a child got involved in an adult situation. Every time Bob tries to rebuild his life, Springfield won't let him. He attempts legitimate work after his first release. He tries running for mayor and actually wins through honest campaigning. He tries teaching. He tries starting over multiple times. But his past follows him everywhere. Springfield has decided he's a villain and won't let him be anything else. The Cape Fear parody episode where Bob hunts Bart makes more sense from Bob's perspective. He served time, was horrifically abused in prison, was released, and discovered he can't reintegrate into society because everyone knows him as Krusty's evil sidekick. His education is worthless. His talents are unmarketable. His entire life has been destroyed, and the person responsible is a little kid who thought catching criminals was fun. Bob's attempted murders of Bart aren't random violence. They're targeted revenge against the specific person who destroyed his life. From Bob's view, this is justice. Bart ruined him, so Bob wants to ruin Bart. The logic is sociopathic, but understandable given what Bob has endured. Compare Bob's crimes to Bart's impact. Bob framed someone for robbery. Bart destroyed Bob's entire life, led to years of torture in prison, and made reintegration impossible. Bob tries to kill one person. Bart's actions have caused Bob endless suffering over decades. Who's actually done more damage in that relationship? Look at how Springfield treats Bob versus how it treats other criminals. Fat Tony is a mob boss who commits actual murders and walks free. Burns has done countless crimes and faces no real consequences. But Bob, whose worst pre-Bart crime was armed robbery, is treated as Springfield's greatest threat. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. It fits the narrative that a 10-year-old decided was true. Bob's transformation from cultured performer to murderous villain is Bart's doing. If Bart hadn't interfered, Bob might have successfully taken over Krusty's show, built a career, and never become violent. Bob's descent into villainy is a direct result of the trauma Bart caused. Every attempted murder, every crime Bob commits after the first one is really Bart's responsibility. The episode where Bob becomes mayor of Springfield shows he can actually lead competently. His policies improve the town. He makes Springfield better, but everyone assumes he's evil because of what Bart established about his character. They can't see that Bob might actually have something to contribute because Bart's narrative has stuck. Think about Bob's prison rehabilitation attempts. He completes education programs, participates in therapy, earns good behavior credits. He does everything the system says he should do to prove he's reformed. But none of it matters because Springfield has decided he's irredeemable. The social label Bart created for Bob is permanent regardless of Bob's actual behavior. His hatred of Bart is completely rational given the circumstances. A child destroyed an adult's entire life and faced no consequences. That child is celebrated as a hero while Bob is marked as a monster. Bob watching Bart live happily with his family, while Bob's family rejects him, watching Bart face no punishment for ruining lives, while Bob can't escape punishment, that would drive anyone to rage. What makes this really disturbing is that society keeps punishing Bob for trying to escape a life Bart destroyed. Bob wasn't a violent person before his first incarceration. Prison made him violent. The abuse, the torture, the dehumanization, it broke something in him. Then Springfield acts shocked when the man they broke behaves like he's broken. Bob's intelligence makes it worse. He's smart enough to see exactly what happened to him, smart enough to understand the injustice, but trapped in a system that won't let him fix it. His education should have been an advantage, but instead becomes another source of suffering because other prisoners torture him specifically for being educated and sophisticated. The cycle is entirely Bart's fault. Bob crimes to get revenge. His revenge fails. He goes back to prison. He's tortured again. He gets released. He can't find work because of his record. He tries revenge again. The cycle repeats endlessly, and it all traces back to the moment Bart decided to investigate Krusty's frame-up. If Bart had just stayed out of it, Bob would have served time for robbery and moved on with his life. What's most disturbing is that Springfield actively prevents Bob's redemption. Even when he shows genuine change, demonstrates competence, tries to contribute to society, everyone treats him as irredeemable. Bart established the narrative that Bob is evil, and Springfield has decided that narrative is permanent. Bob could save the town, and they'd still see him as a villain. His villain arc isn't psychological instability. It's a rational response to a system that ruined his life and then tortured him for trying to fix it. Every crime Bob commits after the initial frame-up is society's fault for breaking him and refusing to let him heal. Bart started the destruction, but Springfield finished it by ensuring Bob could never escape the consequences of one mistake, made out of desperation for recognition. Moving forward, we have Smithers' trapped servitude theory. Smithers might not be loyal by choice. He might be trapped in a psychologically abusive relationship he can't escape due to conditioning that's destroyed his ability to leave. The Burns-Smithers dynamic shows every sign of textbook domestic abuse transferred to an employment relationship. Watch how Burns treats Smithers across the series. Constant degradation and humiliation. Burns calls him incompetent, worthless, disposable. He forgets Smithers' name regularly. He threatens to fire him constantly. He makes Smithers do degrading tasks that have nothing to do with his job. When Smithers succeeds, Burns takes credit. When things go wrong, Burns blames Smithers. That's systematic psychological abuse. Smithers' response is classic abuse victim behavior. He excuses Burns' cruelty. He blames himself when Burns mistreats him. He genuinely believes he deserves the abuse because he's somehow failed to meet Burns' standards. When Burns does something especially terrible, Smithers finds ways to rationalize it as understandable or even justified. He's internalized the abuse as normal. The sacrifices Smithers makes go far beyond reasonable employment. He gives up his personal life completely. He's available 24 hours a day. He has no hobbies, no friends outside work, no romantic relationships. His entire existence revolves around serving Burns. That's not dedication. That's his identity being consumed by the abusive relationship. Homer the Smithers reveals what happens when Smithers tries to separate. Burns hires Homer to temporarily replace Smithers, and Smithers has a complete psychological breakdown. He can't function without the structure of serving Burns. He falls apart without the abuse to organize his life around. That's trauma bonding so severe that separation causes crisis. Think about how Smithers responds to Burns being hurt or threatened. When Burns is in danger, Smithers suffers more than Burns does. When Burns is shot, Smithers is more devastated than if he'd been shot himself. His entire emotional regulation is dependent on Burns being okay. He's lost the ability to have feelings that aren't about Burns. The financial control Burns has over Smithers mirrors domestic abuse. Smithers probably earns decent money, but Burns controls his employment absolutely. One moment of disfavor and Smithers loses everything. That financial dependence keeps him trapped. He can't leave because leaving means losing his livelihood, his home, his entire structure of existence. Look at the rare moments when Smithers stands up to Burns. He asserts himself briefly, sets a boundary, expresses his own needs. Burns punishes him instantly, either through emotional withdrawal or direct retaliation. Smithers learns that asserting himself causes suffering, so he stops trying. That's conditioning through punishment that destroys autonomy. Smithers' sexual orientation becomes relevant here. He's gay and deeply closeted throughout most of the series. Burns knows about Smithers' orientation and uses it as another form of control. The power dynamic is affected by Smithers never being able to fully be himself. He's hiding his identity while serving someone who demeans him, creating layers of self-denial that reinforce the abuse. His fantasies about Burns are disturbing when viewed through abuse lens. Smithers daydreams about Burns, returning his devotion, praising him, recognizing his worth. These fantasies aren't healthy attraction. They're abuse victim fantasies of finally getting the approval that would make all the suffering worthwhile. He's dreaming that the abuse will stop and Burns will suddenly value him. Think about Smithers' relationships with other people. He has no close friends. He struggles with social interaction outside his dynamic with Burns. He's lost the ability to form relationships where he's not in the servant role. The abuse has warped his psychology so severely that he can't conceptualize human connection except through servitude and degradation. The few times Smithers tries to have a life outside Burns, it fails immediately. He attempts hobbies. They get interrupted by Burns demanding his attention. He considers other jobs, but can't imagine working for anyone else. He's been with Burns so long that his identity has been completely subsumed. He's not Wayland Smithers who works for Burns. He's Burns's assistant and nothing else. Burns's manipulation tactics are textbook. He alternates between cruelty and occasional small kindnesses. When he does something minimally decent, Smithers is pathetically grateful. That intermittent reinforcement is more powerful than consistent abuse or consistent kindness. It creates addiction to the relationship because the rare, positive moments feel so powerful against the background of constant negativity. Watch what happens in episodes where Burns is temporarily absent. Smithers doesn't enjoy the freedom. He becomes anxious, lost, desperate to find Burns. His panic during these separations shows how dependent he's become. This isn't missing someone you care about. This is addiction to an abusive dynamic. Smithers enables Burns' evil because he's been conditioned to see Burns' needs as more important than morality. When Burns does something terrible, Smithers helps. He's lost his own moral compass because Burns has replaced it. He'll do anything Burns demands because his identity is built on serving Burns, and he can't distinguish between serving Burns and being himself anymore. The power imbalance is extreme, and Smithers doesn't see it. Burns is a billionaire. Smithers is an employee. Burns can destroy Smithers' life with one decision. But Smithers believes this is a relationship between equals because he's rationalized the abuse into something like friendship or family. He can't see how utterly powerless he actually is. Think about Smithers' future. What happens when Burns dies? Smithers has spent his entire adult life serving someone who abuses him. When that person is gone, Smithers will have no identity, no purpose, no framework for existing. The abuse has become the structure his life depends on. Without it, he'll completely fall apart. His family history might explain how he ended up here. Smithers' father also worked for Burns and died in service to him. Smithers was literally raised to serve Burns. The conditioning started in childhood. He never had a chance to develop independent identity. Burns has controlled his entire life from youth into middle age. The most tragic aspect is that Smithers has spent so long defining himself through Burns that leaving would mean confronting that he wasted his entire life on someone who sees him as property. The cognitive dissonance would be unbearable, so he stays, pretending the abuse is loyalty, pretending servitude is devotion, slowly dying inside while maintaining the performance that he's exactly where he wants to be. Now let's talk about Ralph Wiggum's hidden trauma theory. Ralph Wiggum might not have been born this way. Something might have happened to him that broke his mind. The evidence suggests Ralph was once more capable, and what we see is regression from trauma that nobody addresses because his father is the police chief and can cover it up. I Love Lisa shows Ralph can feel complex emotions and process social situations when motivated. He understands that Lisa gave him a Valentine, interprets it as romantic interest, and plans accordingly. He experiences genuine heartbreak when she rejects him. That's sophisticated emotional processing from a kid everyone treats as completely mentally disabled. The heartbreak scene itself is revealing. When Lisa tells Ralph she doesn't like him romantically, he doesn't just cry or get upset. He processes the information, understands what it means for his hopes, and expresses genuine devastation. You can see the exact moment his heart breaks. That level of emotional awareness doesn't match how Ralph acts the rest of the time. Earlier episodes show Ralph being more competent. His regression seems to have a timeline. In early appearances, he's slow but functional. As the series progresses, he gets worse. His speech becomes more incoherent. His understanding seems to diminish. He's not developing normally. He's actively losing capabilities. Chief Wiggum's terrible parenting is obvious, but it might be covering up something more sinister. Chief Wiggum is a spectacularly bad father. He's negligent, dismissive, often forgets Ralph exists. But what if that neglect isn't just incompetence? What if Chief Wiggum is deliberately not seeking help for Ralph because doing so would reveal something terrible that happened? Look at how the school system handles Ralph. Springfield Elementary clearly knows something is wrong with him, but they don't properly assess him, don't get him special education services, don't involve child protective services. They just put him in regular classes where he obviously can't function. Why isn't anyone helping this child? Why is everyone pretending his condition is normal or acceptable? Ralph shows signs of neurological damage. His speech patterns, his motor control issues, his inability to process basic information, these all point to brain injury. Kids don't naturally regress like this unless something physical happened to their brains. Trauma, injury, poisoning, something caused Ralph's cognitive decline. Think about Chief Wiggum's position. He's the police chief, incompetent though he is. If something happened to Ralph that requires investigation, Chief Wiggum has the power to make that investigation disappear. Medical records could be hidden. Witnesses could be pressured. Evidence could be lost. If Ralph's condition is the result of crime or abuse, Chief Wiggum could cover it up. The specific nature of Ralph's difficulties suggests traumatic brain injury. He has good days and bad days. Sometimes he's nearly functional. Other times he's completely dissociated from reality. That fluctuation is consistent with brain damage where neural pathways are disrupted but not completely destroyed. His brain is working around damage, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. His moments of lucidity are heartbreaking. When Ralph says something that shows he understands people laugh at him, that he knows he's different, you're seeing awareness break through from wherever his real consciousness is trapped. He's in there somewhere, watching himself fail to function properly, unable to control it or fix it. Watch how other adults treat Ralph. They're uncomfortable around him. They avoid engaging with him directly. They speak to him in overly simple language, but with an edge of pity or discomfort. That's not how adults respond to naturally developmentally disabled children. That's how people act around a victim they can't help and feel guilty about. The school's failure to provide appropriate support suggests institutional pressure to not examine Ralph's condition too closely. Teachers like Ms. Hoover clearly don't want to deal with him, but also don't push for proper assessment. It's like everyone's been told to just let Ralph be how he is and not ask questions about why he's like this. Medical neglect is obvious. Ralph should be seeing neurologists, undergoing cognitive assessments, receiving therapeutic interventions. But there's no indication any of this is happening. Chief Wiggum isn't pursuing medical care beyond presumably basic checkups. That neglect is actionable if anyone bothered to report it. Think about what Ralph's life is like from inside his damaged consciousness. If he was more capable before and can still sometimes access that capacity, he's partially aware of what he's lost. He's trapped in a broken brain, watching himself fail socially and academically, unable to fully understand why he can't do things other kids can do. That's a special kind of hell. His social isolation is profound. Other children mock him. Adults pity him. Nobody actually engages with Ralph as a person with potential. He's been written off by everyone, which means nobody's really trying to reach whatever capabilities he still has. The isolation compounds whatever damage already exists. The school system's knowing failure to help represents institutional child abuse. They know Ralph needs services. They know he's struggling. They know his father isn't getting him help. But they don't intervene. They just watch him fail year after year, documenting the failure but doing nothing to stop it. Every adult who should be protecting Ralph is complicit in his abandonment. What happened to Ralph might never be revealed because too many people have stakes in keeping it hidden. If it was abuse, Chief Wiggum might be covering for the abuser. If it was neglect that caused injury, Chief Wiggum is covering his own incompetence. If it was environmental poisoning, someone powerful has reasons to suppress that information. The conspiracy to not help Ralph grows larger the longer it continues. The really heartbreaking part is that Ralph occasionally shows awareness of his condition, and people laugh at him. When he says something that reveals he knows people mock him, the audience treats it as another funny Ralph moment. But it's not funny. It's a damaged child expressing pain that nobody takes seriously because they've decided he's too impaired to really understand what's happening to him. Ralph doesn't get better because nobody's actually trying to make him better. He gets worse because trauma, especially brain trauma in children, compounds over time without treatment. Every year that passes without intervention makes recovery less likely, and everyone with the power to help has decided it's easier to just leave him broken and pretend that's okay. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Principal Skinner isn't who he says he is, and the town's decision to force him to keep lying might be the cruelest thing in the series. The principal and the pauper reveals that Seymour Skinner is actually Armin Tanzarian, a street kid who assumed the identity of the real Sergeant Seymour Skinner after he died in Vietnam. The backstory is tragic on its own. Armin Tanzarian was a troubled youth who got drafted, met Sergeant Skinner in Vietnam, and when he thought Skinner died, he took his identity to escape his own past and honor his fallen friend. He tracked down Skinner's mother and built an entire life around being someone he wasn't. That's not simple identity theft. That's trauma. Response to war. Think about what this reveals about Skinner's psychology. He's been living as someone else for over 20 years. He speaks to Sergeant Skinner's mother as if he's her son. He's taken on Skinner's mannerisms, history, preferences. He's literally erased Armin Tanzarian and replaced him with Seymour Skinner. That level of identity performance requires either incredible dedication or complete psychological absorption. The real Seymour Skinner shows up and reveals the truth. He's been in hiding, dealing with his own post-war trauma. He wants his life back. This should be a moment where everyone works to untangle a complex situation with compassion. Instead, Springfield chooses violence. The town's reaction is horrifyingly selfish. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about either Skinner's needs or rights. They care that changing their perception is inconvenient. They've known Seymour Skinner for 20 years. Accepting that he's actually Armin Tanzarian would require mental work. So they reject reality and choose comfortable fiction. Judge Snyder's ruling is governmental enforcement of psychological torture. The judge legally declares that Armin Tanzarian must continue calling himself Seymour Skinner, must continue living as Skinner, and can never reference his real identity. The real Seymour Skinner is paid off and sent away. The town officially mandates that Armin continue living a lie. Think about what this does to Armin psychologically. He confessed his truth, revealed his real identity, and society's response was to force him back into the false identity and make it illegal to be himself. That's institutional gaslighting. The government is requiring him to deny his own existence. His military service makes it darker. Armin Tanzarian served in Vietnam. He experienced combat trauma. He came home and coped by assuming a dead man's identity. That's dissociation, a trauma response where you detach from yourself because yourself is too damaged to inhabit. Instead of getting him psychological help, Springfield forces him deeper into the dissociation. Mother Skinner's role is particularly cruel. She knows Armin isn't her real son. She's known for 20 years, but she prefers the lie because Armin became the son she wanted. He's obedient, present, attentive. Her real son was more independent, so she colludes in forcing Armin to continue being her fake son because she likes the fake version better than the real thing. The school board maintains employment but under the false identity. Armin can keep his job, his home, his life, but only if he continues pretending to be someone else. His livelihood is contingent on living the lie. He literally can't afford to be himself. Economic coercion enforces the psychological abuse. Look at what this means for Armin's relationships. Every person in Springfield knows him as Seymour Skinner. His friends, colleagues, students, they all know the false identity. The town's decision means Armin can never have an authentic relationship with anyone. Every interaction is built on enforced deception. He's required to be fake for the comfort of everyone around him. The real Seymour Skinner gets paid to disappear. The town literally bribes the actual person to stop existing so they don't have to adjust their worldview. They're so committed to their comfortable lie that they'll pay money to suppress truth. And the real Skinner accepts, showing how trauma and bribes can make people abandon their own identities. Edna Krabappel's response is telling. She was dating Skinner, thought she knew him, and when his real identity is revealed, she's briefly interested in Armin before deciding she prefers the fake Skinner. His romantic relationship is with a woman who explicitly chooses his false persona over his real self. Even intimacy is poisoned by the enforced lie. Think about Armin's internal experience after the ruling. He tried to be honest, tried to reclaim himself, and was forcibly denied. Every day he wakes up and has to be Seymour Skinner, even though he's Armin Tanzarian. Every time someone calls him Seymour, he's reminded that his real name is illegal. Every interaction reinforces that being himself is forbidden. The episode's meta-controversy mirrors its content. Fans hated this episode, wanting it forgotten and never referenced again. The show's response was to mostly pretend it never happened, just like Springfield pretends Armin isn't real. Art and audience both chose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. Later episodes occasionally reference the incident, but always obliquely. Characters sometimes slip and mention Armin or Tanzarian before catching themselves. These slips show the lie isn't fully stable. Everyone knows the truth but has agreed to pretend they don't. That's collective delusion enforced through social pressure. What makes this genuinely horrifying is that Springfield chose collective gaslighting over accepting uncomfortable truth. They're not confused about reality. They know exactly what happened. They simply decided reality is less important than their comfort, and they used governmental authority to force their delusion onto someone else. Armin has to spend every day performing an identity that isn't his, honoring the memory of a man he once knew by erasing himself, living as a ghost haunting his own life. The real Armin Tanzarian is legally dead, killed by judicial decree and social pressure. Seymour Skinner is a zombie identity animated by someone who has no right to inhabit it but is forced to anyway. The tragedy is that both Skinner and Tanzarian are victims. The real Skinner had his identity stolen and was paid to accept that theft. Armin stole an identity as trauma response and was then trapped in it by social decree. Everyone's suffering so Springfield can avoid the minor discomfort of adjusting their mental models about someone's name and history. Up next is Troy McClure's blackmail and decline theory. Troy McClure might be trapped in a blackmail situation that's systematically destroying his career and personal life. A Fish Called Selma shows exactly how Hollywood's exploitation machine works, and Troy's stuck in it with no escape. Troy's career trajectory tells the story. He starts as a legitimate leading man with real talent. Multiple episodes reference his earlier work in quality productions. He had range, charisma, genuine acting ability, but something happened that derailed his career and pushed him into progressively worse projects. The decline isn't talent loss, it's systematic destruction. The rumors about Troy are deliberately vague, but clearly sexual in nature. Characters make knowing jokes about Troy and Fish. They reference scandals that are never explicitly detailed. That vague reference pattern is consistent with industry blackmail, where everyone knows something compromising happened, but specific details are suppressed to maintain control over the victim. A Fish Called Selma reveals the blackmail structure. Troy's agent tells him his career is dying because of the scandal. To rehabilitate his image, he needs to publicly date and marry a woman. The arranged marriage isn't about love or even companionship. It's about creating a public image that counters whatever the scandal suggests about Troy's private life. Think about what this means. Troy's career survival is contingent on living a lie. He has to perform heterosexuality publicly to make audiences and studios comfortable enough to hire him. His actual preferences, whatever they are incompatible with career success. So he's forced to choose between authentic life and professional survival. Selma is selected because she's desperate enough to accept a fake marriage. She needs security. Troy needs cover. Their marriage is transaction, not relationship. Both are trapped in different ways by the systems that control their lives. Troy's trapped by Hollywood blackmail. Selma's trapped by economic precarity. The marriage performance shows how completely Troy's privacy is violated. He has to appear in public with Selma constantly. They have to show affection. They have to convince people the relationship is real. Troy's forced to perform intimacy with someone he doesn't actually love to save his career. That's psychological prostitution dressed up as marriage. When Troy realizes the marriage might require having children, he refuses and walks away. That's the boundary even blackmail can't make him cross. He'll fake a marriage, but won't create children within a lie. His refusal costs him the career rehabilitation the marriage was supposed to provide. He chooses authentic refusal over complete submission. But look at what happens after the divorce. Troy's career doesn't recover. He's back to doing worse projects than before. The attempted image rehabilitation failed, so Hollywood punishes him by pushing him further down. Each failed attempt to play along with their demands results in worse opportunities. His later appearances show progressive degradation. Troy goes from leading roles to supporting parts to commercials to industrial films to educational videos. He's working his way down through every tier of acting work, taking whatever he can get. The blackmail isn't just controlling him, it's slowly destroying him by strangling his career. Think about Troy's isolation. He can't talk about the blackmail without making it worse. He can't get legitimate help because the people who could help are part of the system exploiting him. He's surrounded by people who know about his situation but won't intervene because Hollywood protects its exploitation systems. The financial aspect is relevant. Troy presumably makes less money as his career declines. He might be deep in debt from maintaining a lifestyle he can no longer afford. Financial desperation makes people vulnerable to further exploitation. The worse Troy's finances get, the more he has to accept whatever work is offered, no matter how degrading. His agent is complicit in the exploitation. Instead of finding Troy legitimate work or helping him escape the blackmail, the agent pushes him into progressively worse situations. The agent's job should be protecting Troy's interests, but actually the agent is protecting the industry's interests by ensuring Troy stays controlled. Look at how the industry treats Troy compared to other actors with scandals. Some actors survive scandals and maintain careers. Others get destroyed. The difference isn't usually the severity of scandal. It's whether you play along with Hollywood's demands for rehabilitation. Troy tried to play along and failed, so now he's being made an example of. The educational video work Troy ends up doing shows how far he's fallen. Get confident, stupid! And similar videos are what actors do when they have no other options. These are bottom-tier work that barely pays. Troy's gone from leading man to actor we hire when we need someone recognizable but cheap. His awareness of his own decline is tragic. Troy knows what's happened to him. He's not oblivious. He makes comments about his career struggles, acknowledges he's not getting quality roles anymore. He sees the prison he's in, but can't escape it. That awareness, without ability to change, makes the suffering worse. Think about Troy's mental health. He's living a fake public life while his real life disintegrates. He's forced to smile and perform while his career dies. He faces constant reminders that he could have maintained success if he just continued living the lie. That psychological pressure with no relief eventually breaks people. The Simpsons treats Troy as comedic, but the subtext is dark. You might remember me from becomes a running gag about his declining career, but it's actually about a man watching his dreams die while trapped in a system that's deliberately destroying him. The humor masks horror. Phil Hartman's real-life tragedy adds another layer. Hartman voiced Troy brilliantly, understanding the mix of confidence and desperation the character needed. After Hartman's death, Troy stopped appearing, as if the character died with the actor. The connection between performer and character makes Troy's suffering feel more real. What makes Troy's situation truly dark is that his blackmail and decline might be systematic industry practice, not unique to him. How many actors are trapped in similar situations? How many careers are destroyed through blackmail and exploitation? Troy might represent a whole class of performers whose talent was destroyed because they couldn't or wouldn't conform to industry demands. The most disturbing aspect is that Troy never escapes. He doesn't get a redemption arc or career resurrection. He just keeps declining, keeps taking worse work, keeps living with the consequences of refusing to fully submit to Hollywood's control. His trajectory is slow-motion career death happening in front of audiences who laugh without understanding they're watching someone be destroyed. Now let's talk about Springfield mob government conspiracy theory. The Springfield police force might be deliberately incompetent because the mob has government-level protection. Fat Tony operates openly, commits obvious crimes, and never faces real consequences. That's not lucky. That's systematic corruption protecting organized crime. Look at the pattern. Fat Tony appears throughout the series committing crimes in plain sight. Murder, extortion, illegal gambling, construction fraud, waste disposal violations. Everyone knows he's a mobster. His criminal activity isn't hidden, but Chief Wiggum never successfully prosecutes him. Arrests don't stick. Evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. The system fails every single time. Chief Wiggum's incompetence seems strategic when you examine it closely. He's not just stupid, he's selectively stupid. He solves cases when they don't involve organized crime. He makes arrests that actually lead to prosecution when they're not mob-related. But every investigation into Fat Tony's organization mysteriously fails through Wiggum's incompetence. That's convenient incompetence, not random stupidity. Think about the construction industry in Springfield. Fat Tony's company gets every major contract despite clearly doing terrible work. Buildings collapse, roads crumble immediately. Safety violations are constant, but the city keeps awarding contracts to mob front companies. Someone in government is deliberately giving mob organizations access to public money. Mayor Quimby's corruption is well documented. He takes bribes, has mob connections, uses his position for personal gain. But his relationship with Fat Tony goes deeper than normal corruption. Quimby protects mob operations systematically. When anyone threatens organized crime interests, Quimby intervenes using governmental authority. The waste disposal industry shows clear mob control. Springfield's trash. Collection, recycling, and disposal systems are all run by companies with obvious mob connections. Environmental violations are constant. Illegal dumping happens openly, but no regulatory agency ever actually shuts them down. They pay fines and keep operating. Look at the federal government's absence. The FBI should be investigating organized crime in Springfield. The DEA should be involved given the drug trade Fat Tony references. Federal prosecutors should be building RICO cases. But federal authorities never appear to challenge mob control. Why? Because someone at the federal level has decided to let it continue. The witness protection program failures are revealing. Multiple episodes reference witnesses against the mob being killed or disappeared. The protection system that should keep witnesses safe consistently fails. That's not incompetence, that's deliberate sabotage. Someone inside law enforcement is giving witness locations to the mob. Think about the Springfield Police Department's budget. They're poorly funded despite high crime rates. Why? Because properly funding police might lead to actual mob investigations. Keeping the police budget low ensures officers are too stretched to effectively investigate organized crime. The department's weakness is maintained deliberately. Fat Tony's legitimate business fronts are obvious. The legitimate businessman's social club isn't fooling anyone, but businesses that want liquor licenses or building permits have to work with Tony's organization. The mob has inserted itself into every regulatory process, and government officials enable this by pretending the front companies are real. The construction bid rigging is blatant. Fat Tony's company wins contracts with inflated bids. Legitimate companies get threatened if they try to compete. City officials award contracts to mob companies knowing they're mob companies. That requires coordination between organized crime and multiple government departments. Look at how the court system handles mob cases. Judges dismiss charges on technicalities. Prosecutors make procedural errors that invalidate cases. Defense attorneys get access to sealed documents. The legal system has been compromised at every level to ensure mob operations continue uninterrupted. The police evidence room failures show internal corruption. Evidence against mob members disappears. Chain of custody breaks. Recordings get erased. These aren't accidents. Someone inside the police department is destroying evidence to protect organized crime, and nobody stops it from happening repeatedly. Think about organized crime's integration into legitimate business. Fat Tony has relationships with legitimate business owners who aren't mobsters but work with mob organizations out of necessity. The construction industry, restaurant business, waste disposal all have to work with organized crime to operate in Springfield. The mob has become infrastructure. The drug trade operates openly with no real interference. References throughout the series suggest significant narcotics trafficking through Springfield. Police occasionally make small busts of street-level dealers, but the distribution network never gets dismantled. That's because investigators are prevented from following evidence up the chain to organized crime. Protection money is clearly being paid. Businesses pay off the mob for protection, but they also pay off police through fees and licensing. The mob and police are both extracting money from businesses, suggesting they're working together rather than opposing each other. Look at political campaigns. Organized crime contributes to candidates who will protect mob interests. Those candidates win and then use governmental power to shield mob operations. The cycle perpetuates itself through campaign finance that's technically legal but functions as bribery. The pattern extends beyond Springfield. Shelbyville has its own mob operations. Capital City presumably does too. This suggests organized crime has protection at the state level, not just locally. The corruption goes up through state government and possibly federal government. Think about what this means for ordinary citizens. They're living in a city where organized crime operates with government protection. Their tax dollars fund police who won't protect them from mobsters. Their votes go to politicians who are bought off. The social contract has been broken completely and most people don't even realize it. The most disturbing possibility is that this arrangement has been in place for decades. Springfield's mob-government alliance might be generational. Fat Tony inherited his position from previous mob bosses who had relationships with previous corrupt officials. The system has become so entrenched that removing it would require dismantling and rebuilding multiple institutions simultaneously. What started as isolated corruption has become systematic. It's not a few bad cops or one corrupt mayor. It's comprehensive institutional capture where organized crime has infiltrated and controls significant portions of government, law enforcement, courts, and regulatory agencies. Springfield operates as a mob state with democratic trappings. Moving on to Groundskeeper Willie's dangerous instability theory. Groundskeeper Willie might have a violent criminal past that no one's properly investigated. His constant references to violence and trauma suggest experiences that should have disqualified him from working around children, but Springfield's dysfunction means dangerous people get hired without vetting. Willie's references to killing people are frequent and specific. He doesn't just mention violence abstractly. He describes methods, talks about specific incidents, references bodies and disposal. Most people treat this as Willie's colorful Scottish personality, but what if he's actually confessing to murders and everyone's too uncomfortable to investigate the grease theft in The Dance is revealing. Willie admits to stealing grease, describes elaborate theft operations, and shows detailed knowledge of black market grease networks. That's organized crime involvement. He's not just stealing. He's part of a criminal distribution system that requires connections and sophistication. His combat abilities appear in multiple episodes. Willie can fight effectively, knows military tactics, displays physical capabilities beyond a normal groundskeeper. When threats emerge, Willie knows exactly how to respond with violence. That suggests military or paramilitary training. Where did a school groundskeeper learn to fight like that? Think about Willie's immigration story. He came to America from Scotland under circumstances that are never fully explained. Did he immigrate legally, or is he undocumented? If he's undocumented, that might explain why no background checks were performed before hiring him at a school. The school might be employing someone illegally because properly vetting him would reveal his illegal status. The Treehouse of Horror episodes show Willie's capabilities without comedy constraints. He murders people efficiently, understands how to terrify victims, displays knowledge of killing that seems too specific to be just horror parody. What if these exaggerated horror versions are revealing Willie's actual skills that he normally keeps hidden? His extreme poverty is suspicious. Willie lives in a shack at the school, survives on minimal income, has no apparent other resources. But someone with his skills and work ethic should be able to find better employment. Why is he stuck at Springfield Elementary? Is he hiding from something? Is this the only job he could get without proper documentation? Look at his relationship with authority. Willie hates Skinner and the school administration but stays employed despite constant conflicts. Why doesn't he quit? Why doesn't he get fired despite his insubordination? Maybe he can't quit because he needs this specific job that doesn't ask questions. Maybe he can't be fired because he knows something compromising about the school. His Scottish background hints at potential involvement in violent conflicts. Scotland has history of sectarian violence, football hooliganism, and organized crime. Willie's age suggests he grew up during periods of significant social unrest. His references to violence might be recalling actual experiences of gang warfare or political violence. The school's failure to properly employ a groundskeeper with documentation is criminal negligence. They have someone with obvious trauma and potential violent history working around children daily. Willie has access to all areas of the school, knows children's schedules and routines could potentially harm students. But nobody's performing background checks or psychological evaluations. Think about what Willie witnesses. He sees everything that happens on school grounds. He knows about teacher abuse, administrative corruption, safety violations. He's mentioned seeing terrible things but never reports them. Why? Is he keeping quiet as part of staying under the radar himself? Is he being paid off or threatened? His physical strength is abnormal. Willie performs labor that should require multiple people or machinery. He's unreasonably strong for someone his age and build. That physical capability combined with combat knowledge makes him potentially very dangerous if he decided to become violent. The anger management issues are obvious. Willie has explosive temper, threatens people regularly, destroys property when frustrated. He's shown almost killing people in fits of rage. The school's employment of someone with such clear anger problems around children is reckless endangerment. Look at his substance use. Willie drinks heavily, reference drug use casually. He's often intoxicated while responsible for school grounds and equipment. That's dangerous on multiple levels, but also suggests he's self-medicating for trauma or addiction issues that aren't being treated. His loneliness and isolation might make him more dangerous. Willie has no friends, no family in Springfield, no support system. Isolated people with violent capabilities and unprocessed trauma are higher risk for violence. He's a pressure cooker with no relief valve. Think about the liability. If Willie did hurt someone, the school would be responsible for employing someone they never properly vetted. Parents could sue, criminal charges could follow. But Springfield Elementary continues employing him despite all the warning signs because the system is too dysfunctional to recognize or address the risk. His work ethic is the only thing preventing him from being fired. Willie actually does his job despite his issues. The grounds stay maintained, repairs get done, he shows up consistently. In Springfield's degraded employment market, someone who actually works is valuable enough that his other problems get ignored. The most disturbing possibility is that other schools in Springfield are equally negligent about vetting employees. If Willie can work at a school despite obvious red flags, how many other potentially dangerous people are employed in positions with child access? Springfield's dysfunction might be creating systematic child endangerment across multiple institutions. What makes Willie genuinely concerning is the combination of factors: violent past, combat skills, anger management issues, substance abuse, access to children, and no oversight. Any one of these would be concerning. Altogether, they create a situation where someone could snap and cause serious harm, and everyone would be shocked because they treated all the warning signs as just Willie being Willie. The scariest part is wondering what would have to happen for anyone to actually investigate Willie's background. Would someone have to get hurt? Would he have to explicitly threaten violence? Springfield's authorities are so incompetent and negligent that Willie could probably work at that school for decades without anyone ever properly vetting him or addressing the obvious risks he represents. Now let's talk about Dr. Hibbert's systematic medical negligence theory. Dr. Hibbert might be responsible for dozens of deaths due to medical malpractice that everyone ignores because he seems nice. His constant laughter during serious medical situations masks systematic incompetence that's literally killing patients, and the medical system protects him. The laughter is the first and most obvious red flag. Dr. Hibbert laughs at terminal diagnoses. He chuckles while delivering news about serious injuries. He finds humor in patient suffering. That's not bedside manner. That's psychological detachment from the harm he's causing. He's laughing because he's disassociated from the reality of what his malpractice does to people. Homer's crayon lodged in brain for decades shows spectacular diagnostic failure. Homer had symptoms that should have led to brain imaging years earlier. Headaches, cognitive issues, behavioral problems. Any competent doctor would have ordered scans, but Hibbert never caught it. The crayon sat in Homer's brain, causing damage for over 20 years, while Hibbert did regular checkups and never noticed. Think about how many medical emergencies happen in Springfield. Burns gets shot and Hibbert treats him. Multiple characters have heart attacks, strokes, serious injuries. Hibbert is their primary physician. But look at outcomes. People die, suffer complications, have recurring problems that suggest inadequate treatment. The pattern isn't bad luck, it's bad medicine. Prescription errors appear throughout the series. Characters mention getting wrong medications, incorrect dosages, drugs that interact dangerously. Prescription errors kill thousands annually in real health care. Hibbert's errors probably kill Springfield residents, but investigations never happen. His hospital privileges continue despite obvious incompetence. Hospital medical boards are supposed to review doctors with bad outcomes. Hibbert should have faced peer review after multiple patient deaths or serious complications, but he maintains full hospital privileges, suggesting the medical board is either incompetent or deliberately protecting him. Look at his diagnostic patterns. Hibbert often misdiagnoses conditions, misses obvious symptoms, or orders inappropriate treatments. When he does diagnose correctly, his treatment recommendations are sometimes dangerously wrong. Patients are getting harmed by both diagnostic failures and treatment failures. The medical malpractice lawsuits should have destroyed his career. Multiple patients experiencing harm from Hibbert's care means multiple families with grounds to sue, but there's no indication of successful malpractice litigation against him. Why? Is he settling cases with confidentiality agreements? Is the hospital's insurance covering everything? Are lawyers refusing to take cases against him? Think about the insurance implications. Medical malpractice insurance rates are based on claims history. Hibbert should have extremely high premiums or be uninsurable, but he continues practicing, suggesting his malpractice history is being hidden or misrepresented to insurance companies. That's fraud. His continuing education is questionable. Doctors are required to maintain certifications through ongoing education. There's no indication Hibbert is keeping current with medical advances. He practices medicine like he learned it decades ago and never updated his knowledge. That outdated practice causes patient harm. The pharmaceutical company relationships might be influencing his prescribing. Doctors who take payments from drug companies often overprescribe those companies' medications even when they're not optimal. Hibbert might be prescribing based on financial incentives rather than patient needs. Look at his referral patterns. Does Hibbert appropriately refer patients to specialists when conditions exceed his expertise? Or does he try to treat everything himself to collect more fees? Failing to refer patients to appropriate specialists is malpractice when patients need specialist care. Hospital oversight failures are systematic. Hospital administrators should be tracking patient outcomes, identifying problem physicians, and intervening before patients get harmed. But Springfield General, or whatever hospital Hibbert uses, isn't doing this. They're either incompetent or deliberately ignoring problems. Think about the public health implications. Hibbert is Springfield's primary physician for many residents. His incompetence doesn't just affect individual patients. it affects community health. Diseases might be spreading because he misdiagnoses them. Preventable deaths occur because he doesn't recognize warning signs. The medical board's failure to investigate is criminal. State medical boards exist to protect patients from dangerous doctors. Hibbert's pattern of harm should trigger investigation. But there's no indication the medical board has ever examined his practice. That's regulatory failure that enables continued patient harm. His emergency medicine is particularly dangerous. When patients come in with time-sensitive emergencies, Hibbert's delays and errors can be fatal. Heart attacks need immediate treatment. Strokes need immediate intervention. Hibbert's casual approach to emergencies means people die who could have survived with competent care. Look at his interactions with other medical staff. Do nurses question his orders? Do other doctors challenge his diagnoses? Or has hospital culture become accepting of Hibbert's incompetence because he's been there so long that everyone's normalized it? The laughter might be psychological compensation for guilt. If Hibbert is aware that his malpractice harms people, the cognitive dissonance would be unbearable. So he laughs to distance himself psychologically from the suffering he causes. The laughter isn't sociopathic absence of empathy. It's traumatized defense mechanism against guilt. Think about how many preventable deaths have occurred. Cancer missed early when it was treatable. Heart disease not diagnosed until it caused fatal heart attack. Infections not treated properly until they caused sepsis. Each death represents a patient who could have survived with competent medical care. What makes this truly horrifying is that Hibbert's incompetence is enabled by systematic failures at every level. The hospital doesn't stop him. The medical board doesn't investigate him. Insurance companies don't drop him. Lawyers don't successfully sue him. Every institution that should protect patients has failed. Hibbert keeps practicing, keeps harming people, and the system actively protects him because admitting his malpractice would expose their oversight failures. People keep dying, and he keeps laughing. That laugh isn't humor. It's the sound of someone who's broken under the weight of harm they've caused but can't stop causing because the system won't stop them. And Springfield keeps sending patients to him because nobody wants to face the reality that their trusted doctor is actually killing them through incompetence. Moving forward, we have comic book guy's incel radicalization path theory. Comic book guy might be following a path towards something dangerous through his increasing isolation and resentment of society. His pattern shows warning signs of radicalization that everyone dismisses as him just being a difficult nerd, but the indicators are serious. His misanthropy deepens over seasons. Early comic book guy is judgmental and snobby, but relatively harmless. Later seasons show him becoming more bitter, more resentful, more hostile toward everyone around him. That progression from annoying to genuinely angry is classic isolation-based radicalization. The worst episode ever culture he embodies is toxic masculinity wrapped in nerd identity. Comic book guy doesn't just criticize things. He attacks them with disproportionate hostility. He treats any perceived slight or disappointment as personal attack worthy of aggressive response. That hypervigilant stance where everything is interpreted as threat is warning sign of someone developing dangerous mindset. Look at his attitude toward women. Comic book guy wants female attention but also resents women for not giving it to him. When he dates, he's either unrealistically demanding or suffocatingly needy. His inability to form healthy relationships stems from simultaneously desiring and despising women. That's textbook incel psychology. The Agnes relationship briefly showed him capable of connection, which makes its failure more significant. He found someone who accepted him, built a relationship, experienced happiness. Then it ended, and instead of learning from it, he retreated further into isolation and resentment. Failed relationships that could have been learning experiences instead become proof that connection is impossible. His online behavior is particularly concerning. References suggest comic book guy spends extensive time in online communities. These forums can be echo chambers, where resentment gets reinforced and radicalized. He's surrounded by other, isolated men, validating each other's worst thoughts, creating feedback loops that intensify anger and bitterness. Think about his daily life. He runs a comic book store, seeing few people beyond customers. He has no visible friends. His social interaction is mostly arguing with customers or posting criticism online. He lives in his store's basement, isolated from normal society. That level of isolation creates conditions where extreme thoughts go unchallenged. His health crisis in King-Size Homer shows him attempting suicide through overeating. When his lifestyle choices caused heart attack, his response wasn't to get healthy, but to basically attempt slow suicide through continued bad habits. That disregard for his own life suggests someone who's given up on having a future. The suicide attempt aspect is darker than the show treats it. Comic book guy deliberately ate himself toward death. When rescued, he didn't express gratitude or make lifestyle changes. He just returned to the same patterns. That's someone who, on some level, wants to die, but can't quite commit to direct suicide. His resentment toward normies who don't share his interests shows developing us versus them mentality. He sees people with mainstream interests as inferior, less intelligent, less worthy. That categorization of humanity into superior nerds and inferior others creates mental framework that could justify harm against outsiders. Look at his relationship to masculinity. Comic book. Guy doesn't fit traditional masculine stereotypes. He's overweight, socially awkward, interested in things society codes as childish. Rather than accepting alternative masculinity, he's hostile toward both mainstream masculine culture and his own inadequacy at meeting its standards. That internal conflict breeds resentment. His contempt for everything might mask depression. Someone who finds nothing good in the world might be projecting internal emptiness outward. If comic book guy is genuinely depressed and untreated, his judgment and decision-making are impaired. Depressed people with growing resentment sometimes become dangerous. Think about his access to weapons through his store. Comic book stores sell items that could be used as weapons. He has regular contact with customers, knows their routines, has insight into nerd culture gathering places. If he decided to act on resentment, he'd have both opportunity and knowledge to cause harm. The online forum culture he participates in often includes exposure to extreme content. Algorithms push users toward more extreme positions. Comic book guy could be seeing increasingly radical content that normalizes violence or dehumanizes targets of resentment. That exposure shifts baseline of what seems acceptable. His financial situation is precarious. The store barely survives. He lives in the basement. He has no retirement plan or security. Financial desperation combined with social isolation creates conditions where people become vulnerable to extremism, offering simple answers to complex problems. Look at how he processes rejection. When criticized or rejected, comic book guy doesn't reflect on his behavior. He blames others, claims everyone else is wrong, retreats into superiority complex. That inability to accept criticism or learn from social feedback prevents growth and increases isolation. What's most concerning is the trajectory. Comic book guy is getting worse, not better. Each year he's more isolated, more resentful, more hostile. The brief hope of the Agnes relationship is gone. He's heading deeper into darkness with no intervention, no support, no off-ramp from the path he's on. Think about who intervenes with people like comic book guy in real life. Usually nobody until something bad happens. He's dismissed as just a weird nerd, not a threat. His hostile behavior is treated as personality quirk, not warning sign. By the time anyone takes him seriously, it might be too late. The really scary part is that comic book guy represents a type of person who exists in every community. Isolated men with growing resentment, spending time in echo chambers, developing us versus them thinking, showing warning signs that get dismissed. Springfield sees him as harmless joke while he follows radicalization path that sometimes ends in violence. His story isn't just about one character, it's about how society creates and ignores radicalized individuals. We laugh at the bitter nerd while he gets more dangerous. We dismiss his resentment as just internet culture while he builds justifications for potential harm. And we don't intervene until tragedy forces us to ask why nobody saw the warning signs that were actually visible all along. Now let's talk about Reverend Lovejoy's lost faith crisis theory. Reverend Lovejoy might not believe in God anymore, and his entire ministry is hollow performance hiding a spiritual crisis. The evidence suggests he's lost his faith entirely, but continues preaching because he's trapped by profession, expectations, and inability to admit his crisis. In Marge, We Trust shows Lovejoy's breakdown most clearly. Ned Flanders' constant questions and spiritual neediness have broken Lovejoy's ability to care. He can't answer another theological question. He can't pretend to have spiritual insight anymore. The facade cracks, and we see someone who's been going through the motions for so long that he's forgotten what genuine faith feels like. Think about what constant exposure to Ned would do to a minister. Ned asks endless questions about minutiae of faith, treats every tiny decision as moral crisis requiring pastoral guidance, demands constant reassurance and validation. For a minister with genuine faith, this might be annoying but manageable. For a minister whose faith is already shaky, Ned's demands become unbearable burden that accelerates spiritual collapse. His sermon style shows mechanical performance. Lovejoy delivers sermons with no passion, no genuine conviction. He reads from notes in monotone. He makes pro forma gestures toward moral teaching. There's no fire, no authentic spiritual communication. He's performing requirement of ministerial role without having spiritual content to communicate. The train set obsession is telling. Lovejoy spends enormous time on model trains instead of pastoral duties. That hobby functions as escape from ministry that's become burden rather than calling. He'd rather build model railroads than tend his congregation. The displacement activity shows someone who's checked out of their supposed vocation. Look at his marriage. Lovejoy and Helen's relationship shows bitterness and dysfunction. Helen is genuinely religious, deeply judgmental, rigid in her faith. Lovejoy seems exhausted by her religiosity. He can't tell his extremely devout wife that he doesn't believe anymore, so he maintains performance at home too, trapped by her faith that won't tolerate his doubt. His interactions with parishioners lack genuine care. When people come to him with real problems, Lovejoy gives rote responses. He doesn't engage deeply with their suffering or spiritual needs. He's treating ministry like customer service job, where you give scripted responses and move people along. That's not pastoral care. That's going through motions to get through the day. The phone call with the rival minister is revealing. Lovejoy calls another minister to complain about his congregation, and the other minister is fire and brimstone fanatic who makes Lovejoy seem mild by comparison. That call shows Lovejoy understands he's not serving his congregation well, but also can't summon the conviction to do better. Think about theological education and crisis of faith. Ministers who lose faith face unique torture. They've studied theology extensively. They know all the arguments for and against belief. Their crisis isn't ignorance. It's informed doubt that undermines everything they've built their life around. Lovejoy probably has graduate theological education that's now source of his inability to believe. His apathy during crisis situations shows absence of spiritual conviction. When parishioners face tragedy, Lovejoy offers platitudes without evident belief. He says things ministers are supposed to say, but there's no authenticity behind the words. He's reciting lines from script he no longer believes. The pressure to maintain appearance is crushing. Lovejoy is pastor of Springfield's mainline Protestant church. That's public role where everyone expects certain behaviors and beliefs. He can't admit doubt without losing job, status, social position, purpose. So he maintains performance while dying inside. Look at moments when he's forced to offer genuine spiritual guidance. He becomes uncomfortable, deflects, makes jokes, or gives minimalist answers. Someone with vibrant faith would welcome opportunities to share it. Lovejoy treats pastoral moments as chores to complete quickly so he can get back to his trains. His depression is visible, but interpreted as just his personality. People think Lovejoy is naturally apathetic or cynical. They don't recognize he's exhibiting symptoms of someone trapped in life that's become unbearable. The flatness isn't personality, it's depression from living lie he can't escape. Think about what this means for his preaching. Every Sunday, Lovejoy stands in pulpit and speaks about God he doesn't believe in. He references scripture he finds hollow. He offers hope he doesn't feel. Week after week, year after year, performing faith he's lost, trapped in spiritual fraud. The congregation probably senses something is wrong, even if they can't articulate it. Churches led by ministers without faith tend to become spiritually dead. The energy is wrong. The services feel rote. People come and go without real transformation. Springfield's church feels like that. It's social institution, not spiritual community, because leader has no spirituality to share. His inability to quit is tragedy within tragedy. Lovejoy hates ministry but can't leave. And what else would he do? His education is theological. His work history is ministry. He's middle-aged with no other career prospects. Quitting means admitting his entire life's work was wasted, starting over with no skills in secular job market, facing community judgment for abandoning ministry. The financial dependence is prison. Lovejoy depends on church salary, housing, benefits. His wife doesn't work. They've built lifestyle around ministerial income. Walking away means financial crisis and explaining to Helen why he's destroying their financial security by admitting he doesn't believe anymore. Think about the psychological torture of this existence. Lovejoy wakes every day and pretends to believe things he doesn't believe. He counsels people using theology he finds meaningless. He leads worship services celebrating God he's not sure exists. He performs spiritual role while experiencing spiritual void. That disconnect between external performance and internal reality creates profound psychological stress. What makes this genuinely tragic is that Lovejoy is trapped in a profession that requires belief he no longer has. Lawyers who hate law can still practice law. Doctors who hate medicine can still treat patients. But ministers who don't believe can't minister authentically. Their work requires spiritual content they lack. Lovejoy is going through motions of ministry, preaching words that feel hollow, consoling people with hope he doesn't share, slowly dying inside while pretending to have spiritual answers he knows are empty. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Milhouse might be doomed by his genetics to fail at everything important in life, just like every Van Houten before him. The family pattern of weakness, failure, and romantic disaster suggests Milhouse isn't just an unlucky kid. He's carrying genetic and psychological inheritance that predetermines his failures. The Van Houten family history is disaster across generations. Milhouse's parents' marriage is toxic and ends in bitter divorce. His grandparents presumably had similar dysfunction, or they wouldn't have raised Kirk to be the failure he became. The family tree is generational failure stretching back however many generations of Van Houtens have existed. Kirk Van Houten embodies inherited weakness. He loses his job at the cracker factory and can't find comparable employment. His response to divorce is pathetic desperation rather than growth. He lives in an apartment complex for divorced men, drives car designed to advertise his failure. Kirk isn't just unfortunate, he's constitutionally incapable of success. Luann isn't much better. She married Kirk, which shows poor judgment from start. After divorce, she makes questionable decisions about relationships. She ends up with American Gladiator, who represents shallow physical attractiveness over substance. The Van Houtens don't make good choices because they're not capable of making good choices. Milhouse shows the same patterns emerging in childhood. Every romantic attempt fails. Every effort to be cool backfires. Every assertion of confidence collapses immediately. He's not learning from failures and adapting. He's repeating the same failures because his psychology is programmed for failure through genetics and modeled behavior. Think about his physical characteristics. Milhouse has vision problems requiring thick glasses. He has allergies to seemingly everything. He's physically weak and uncoordinated. His body is literally failing him in multiple ways simultaneously. That's not bad luck. That's genetic inheritance of physical weakness. His romantic obsession with Lisa shows Van Houten pattern of pursuing unavailable partners. Kirk married Luann, who clearly didn't respect or love him deeply. Milhouse obsesses over Lisa, who consistently rejects him. The Van Houtens are attracted to people who can't or won't love them back, ensuring relationship failure. Flash forward episodes consistently show adult Milhouse as unsuccessful. In various futures, he's divorced, unemployed, pathetic. The specific details vary, but the outcome is always same. Milhouse grows up to be exactly like Kirk. The genetic curse manifests fully in adulthood. Look at his psychological resilience, or lack thereof. Milhouse crumbles under minimal pressure. Small setbacks devastate him. He can't handle rejection, failure, or disappointment with any grace. His psychological fragility is Van Houten inheritance. They're all emotionally weak people who collapse when challenged. His dependence on Bart shows inability to develop independent identity. Milhouse defines himself through his relationship with Bart. He has no strong sense of self separate from being Bart's friend. That identity weakness is genetic Van Houten trait. None of them have strong enough sense of self to survive independent of relationships they depend on. Think about the name itself. Milhouse Van Houten sounds like a president's name, which is a recurring joke. But the joke is that someone with that impressive-sounding name is actually a loser. The contrast between the name's promise and Milhouse's reality symbolizes the Van Houten curse. They're born with potential suggested by their name, but genetically incapable of fulfilling it. His health problems show genetic weakness manifesting physically. The allergies, vision problems, general physical frailty, these aren't random. They're genetic inheritance of weak Van Houten constitution. The family is physically as well as psychologically weak. The academic struggle, despite clearly having some intelligence, suggests psychological blocks rather than pure stupidity. Milhouse should be capable of decent grades, but his psychology sabotages his academic potential just like it sabotages everything else. He's programmed for failure even in areas where he could theoretically succeed. Look at his relationship with his parents' divorce. Milhouse is traumatized, but also seems to have expected it on some level. He's a Van Houten. His parents' marriage failing is consistent with family pattern. He's watched his parents embody Van Houten weakness his entire life. Their divorce just confirms what he probably always suspected. Van Houtens don't get happy endings. His cousin is mentioned briefly, but presumably exhibits same Van Houten failures. The genetic weakness isn't just Milhouse's immediate family, it's the entire Van Houten bloodline. Every branch of the family tree produces weak, unsuccessful people who fail at life's major challenges. Think about what Milhouse's future holds. He'll grow up looking more like Kirk. He'll fail professionally like Kirk. He'll be romantically unsuccessful like Kirk. He'll become the pathetic middle-aged man his father is. Not because he makes bad choices, though he will, but because he's genetically incapable of making sustained good choices. The really cruel part is that Milhouse seems aware of his curse. He occasionally shows moments of resignation where he understands he's doomed to fail. Those moments of clarity make his continued effort more tragic. He knows he's fighting genetic destiny that he can't overcome, but he keeps trying anyway because what else can he do? His best friend is a Simpson, which guarantees continued association with dysfunction. Even Milhouse's social circle ensures failure. Being Bart's friend means constant proximity to disasters, schemes, and trouble. But Milhouse can't make better friendship choices because Van Houtens don't have good judgment about relationships. What makes Milhouse's genetic doom most disturbing is how early it manifests. He's already showing adult Van Houten failures in childhood, the weakness, the romantic disasters, the inability to assert himself successfully. It's all already there. He doesn't have to wait for adulthood to become a failure. He's been a failure since birth, just taking years to fully manifest what his genetics predetermined. The Van Houten curse isn't just bad luck. It's genetic legacy of psychological and physical weakness, poor judgment, relationship dysfunction, and inevitable failure that gets passed down generation to generation. Milhouse was born into a family of losers, inherited loser genes, and will die. It was always a loser having passed those same genes to whatever unfortunate children he manages to have. The Van Houten line is genetic dead end that keeps producing new victims of its own inherited weakness. Next up is Springfield Elementary systematic child abuse theory. Springfield Elementary isn't just a bad school, it's an institution that systematically abuses children while authorities do nothing. The level of abuse happening there qualifies as institutional torture, but everyone treats it as normal educational dysfunction. The physical plant itself is hazardous. Asbestos in walls, lead paint, structural damage that causes injuries. Children are learning in building that violates multiple safety codes. The school knows about these hazards and chooses not to fix them because fixing costs money. They're deliberately exposing children to health risks. Skinner's militaristic discipline crosses into abuse. He treats students like soldiers, demands absolute obedience, punishes harshly for minor infractions. His Vietnam trauma manifests as authoritarian control over children. He's not educating. He's running boot camp where children get treated like enemy combatants who need breaking. The lunch program serves food that's borderline poisonous. Lunch Lady Doris serves mystery meat, recycled food, actual grease as meal. Children are eating food that doesn't meet nutritional standards and in some cases might be actively harmful. This is state-sanctioned malnutrition of captive minor population. Look at the teachers' attitudes. They've given up on actually teaching. Ms. Hoover shows students movies instead of teaching lessons. Most teachers display contempt for students rather than desire to help them learn. The educational staff has collectively decided children aren't worth genuine effort. Willie's violence towards students is ignored. He's physically rough with kids, threatens them, has actually harmed students. The school employs someone with obvious anger management problems and gives him unsupervised access to children. That's institutional failure to protect vulnerable minors. Think about the budget cuts' impact on children. Textbooks from decades ago, no arts programs, minimal sports equipment, overcrowded classrooms. Children are being denied basic educational resources because Springfield won't properly fund schools. This creates achievement gaps that harm students' entire futures. Superintendent Chalmers' approval shows corruption at district level. He visits the school, sees obvious problems, and does nothing except occasionally yell at Skinner. He's not there to fix systemic issues. He's there to maintain appearance of oversight while actually ignoring institutional abuse. The psychological abuse from teachers is systematic. They mock students who struggle. They favor certain children while discriminating against others. They create classroom environments where learning feels shameful and failure is publicly humiliated. This creates trauma that extends far beyond poor test scores. Look at the safety failures. Children get injured on school grounds regularly. The building's structural problems cause accidents. Proper supervision is absent. When injuries occur, the school's response is minimizing liability rather than preventing future harm. They care more about not getting sued than keeping children safe. The special education failures are especially egregious. Ralph Wiggum clearly needs services he's not receiving. Other students with disabilities or learning differences are mainstreamed without proper support. The school isn't providing legally mandated accommodations, which is federal law violation. Standardized testing pressure creates educational abuse. Teachers teach to tests rather than providing actual education. Students experience intense stress over performance metrics that don't actually indicate learning. The testing regime values scores over student well-being or genuine understanding. Think about class sizes. 30-plus students crammed in, classrooms designed for 20. Impossible for teachers to give individual attention. Children who need help don't get it. Those who could excel are held back. Overcrowding harms every student's educational experience. The bathroom situation alone is abuse. School bathrooms are filthy, broken, often inaccessible. Children hold basic bodily functions because facilities are so bad they avoid using them. Making children endure discomfort over basic biological needs is cruel. Bullying goes unaddressed. School knows Nelson and others terrorize fellow students. They do nothing. Children are getting physically and psychologically abused by peers while administration looks away. The school's bullying problem is well-documented institutional failure to protect vulnerable students. Look at the emotional support services, or lack thereof. The school has no counselors, no mental health resources, no system for addressing student trauma or psychological needs. Children dealing with poverty, family dysfunction, abuse at home get zero support at school. The parent-teacher communication failures leave children without advocacy. Parents don't know what's happening at school. Teachers don't know what's happening at home. Children falling through cracks have no adult who sees their complete situation and intervenes to help. Think about the message being sent to children. They're learning that institutions don't care about their well-being, that authorities will tolerate their abuse, that asking for help is pointless because no adult with power will actually intervene. This creates learned helplessness and distrust that affects their entire development. The fire safety violations are literally life-threatening. Blocked exits, non-functional alarms, outdated evacuation plans. If fire occurred, children would die. The school knows this and continues operating anyway because closing for repairs would be inconvenient. The heating and cooling system failures cause physical distress. Classrooms become extreme temperatures that make learning impossible and create health risks. Children are cold in winter, overheated in spring, suffering physical discomfort that could be prevented with proper building maintenance. Look at the accessibility failures. School doesn't properly accommodate students with physical disabilities. Wheelchairs can't access certain areas. No proper accommodations for blind or deaf students. The physical plant and program design exclude disabled students in violation of federal law. The impact compounds across years. Every year of inadequate education makes subsequent years harder. Children don't learn foundations they need for advanced material. Learning gaps widen. By high school, many students are years behind where they should be, with damage that's difficult or impossible to remediate. What makes this systematic abuse most disturbing is that it's affecting an entire generation of Springfield children. Everyone who goes through that school comes out damaged in some way. The trauma, neglect, and abuse compound over years of exposure. And because it's normalized throughout Springfield, no one thinks to intervene. Child abuse has become educational policy, and everyone's complicit through silence. Parents don't organize to demand better. Teachers don't report upward. Administrators don't make necessary changes. The system protects itself while sacrificing children, and everyone pretends this is an acceptable way to operate a school. Springfield Elementary isn't just failing students academically. It's systematically traumatizing children through institutional abuse that qualifies as torture, but gets dismissed as just urban public school problems. Now let's talk about Mr. Burns's supernatural immortality curse theory. Mr. Burns might be literally cursed with immortality, forced to watch everyone die while he continues existing in his decaying body. The evidence suggests Burns isn't just old. He's supernaturally unable to die, trapped in eternal life that's become eternal suffering. His age is impossible to determine and changes depending on episode. Burns has been alive during events spanning over a century. He's met historical figures from different eras. His personal history includes things that should make him well over 100 years old, possibly 120 or older. No human lives that long and remains functional. The 22 short films episode reveals why Burns survives. He has every disease and condition known to medicine. They're all in perfect balance, keeping each other in check like three stooges trying to go through a doorway at once. That's not medical reality. That's supernatural intervention in biology. Something is preventing natural death despite overwhelming medical reasons he should die. Think about what this means. Burns isn't staying alive through medical technology. He's staying alive through impossible biological stasis, where diseases that should kill him can't actually kill him. His body should have failed decades ago, but something supernatural won't let it fail completely. Rosebud shows Burns's emotional development stopped in childhood. His sled represents his last moment of innocence before wealth and power corrupted him. He's been emotionally frozen for probably a century, unable to develop past the trauma of losing his childhood toy. That stasis isn't psychological alone. It's part of the curse keeping him existing in permanent state of unfulfilled longing. Every person Burns has cared about is dead. His parents died generations ago. Any siblings would be long gone. Friends from his youth are all deceased. Romantic partners have died. Smithers Sr. died serving him, and Burns barely seemed to care because he's watched so many people die that death has become background noise to him. Look at the survival attempts on his life. Burns has been shot, poisoned, attacked by animals, involved in accidents. He survives everything. In Who Shot Mr. Burns, he's shot point blank and survives despite being frail. Someone that weak shouldn't survive gunshot wound, but Burns does. Death keeps trying to take him and failing. His extreme cruelty makes more sense as defense mechanism. When you've watched everyone you care about die for over a century, you stop forming attachments. Burns treats people as disposable because to him they are disposable. They'll all be dead soon from his perspective. Why bother caring about insects that live such brief lives? Think about his wealth accumulation. Burns has been making money for over a century. Compound interest alone would make him incomprehensibly wealthy. But he can't enjoy it because enjoyment requires the ability to die, knowing you lived well. Burns can't die. His wealth is just numbers accumulating while he's trapped in existence he can't escape. The physical decay is horrifying. Burns's body is falling apart. He's weak, diseased, barely functional, but he can't die. He's trapped in body that should have failed completely, experiencing physical deterioration without the mercy of death to end it. He's living corpse that can't complete the process of becoming corpse. His need for power and control might be desperate attempt to feel alive. When nothing can hurt you, when death won't take you, when every experience is just another in infinite series that never ends, maybe causing others to suffer is only way to feel anything. Burns's cruelty could be someone trying to break out of emotional numbness that comes from cursed immortality. Look at his business practices. Burns doesn't need more money. He has more than he could spend in normal lifetime, but he keeps acquiring, exploiting, destroying. Maybe because that's all he has left. Purpose through harm, meaning through suffering, identity through being the villain since he can't be anything else after so long. Think about his perspective on time. A year means nothing to Burns. Decades are recent. Events from 70 years ago feel fresh because they're only a small fraction of his total lived experience. His time perception is so warped that he can't relate to normal humans who measure life in mere decades. The isolation is absolute. Burns can't form genuine connections because he's outlived capacity for connection. You can't befriend people who'll die and blink from your perspective. You can't love people who'll be gone before you even notice. His immortality has forced him into solitude no mortal can comprehend. His memories must be nightmare. Imagine remembering over a century of experiences, all the people who died, all the changes you've witnessed, all the ways world has moved on while you stay frozen. Burns carries weight of memories that should have been buried with him generations ago. The curse might be punishment for something he did early in life. Maybe Burns committed crimes so terrible that he was cursed to never die, forced to exist until he learns lesson he's incapable of learning. His immortality isn't gift, it's eternal sentence. Think about what Burns has watched disappear. Technologies he knew as cutting edge are now in museums. Cities he knew have been rebuilt. Languages have evolved. Cultural references that meant something to him are completely forgotten. He's ghost-haunting world that's not his anymore. His relationship with mortality is inverted. Normal people fear death. Burns should welcome it. He's trapped in decaying body, has outlived everything he cared about, exists in world that's alien to him. But death won't come. The curse denies him the peace that death brings. The physical pain must be constant. Burns's body is riddled with disease and decay. Normal people in his condition would be on massive pain, medication, or dead. But Burns remains conscious, experiencing full weight of his body's deterioration without the mercy of unconsciousness or death. What's really tragic is Burns might have been a different person before the curse took hold. Maybe young Burns had capacity for kindness, love, growth. But when you're cursed to live forever watching everyone die, that kindness gets ground away by centuries of loss. Current Burns might be what's left after immortality destroyed whatever humanity he started with. The horror of Burns's existence is that he's trapped watching cycles of humanity repeat while he remains. He's seen same patterns of greed, violence, love, loss play out thousands of times. Nothing surprises him because he's seen it all before. He's bored by existence that won't end, suffering through eternal life in body that's dying but can't complete dying. He's simultaneously the most powerful person in Springfield and the most pitiable, because all his power can't buy him the one thing he really needs: permission to finally stop existing. Moving on to Marge's enablement destroying the family theory. Marge might be the real problem in the Simpson family by constantly enabling Homer's destructive behavior instead of creating boundaries. Her role as family stabilizer is actually making everything worse by preventing necessary consequences that might force change. The pattern repeats constantly. Homer does something terrible. The family suffers. Marge gets upset but ultimately forgives him. Homer faces no real consequences. He learns nothing. He does it again. Marge enables the cycle by always taking him back, always making excuses, always preventing him from facing reality of his behavior. Think about the financial disasters. Homer makes catastrophic financial decisions repeatedly. He gambles away their money. He makes terrible investments. He gets fired and puts family at risk. But Marge always finds a way to fix it. She takes on extra work. She budgets impossibly tight. She makes sacrifices. Homer never actually has to face full consequences of his financial irresponsibility because Marge absorbs the damage. Her excuse-making becomes complicit in abuse. When Homer strangles Bart, Marge treats it as normal family behavior rather than child abuse. She's normalized violence to a degree where she can't recognize it as problem requiring intervention. That normalization teaches her children that abuse is acceptable part of relationships. Look at the emotional labor Marge performs. She manages everyone's feelings, mediates all conflicts, holds family together through constant effort. But that effort prevents family members from learning to manage their own emotions or resolve their own conflicts. They're all dependent on Marge's emotional labor instead of developing their own capabilities. The A Streetcar Named Marge episode reveals how much Marge has suppressed herself. When she gets role in play, her performance channels rage and desperation she usually keeps buried. The artistic expression lets out truth. Marge is furious about her life, but won't acknowledge that anger directly. She's trapped by her own enabling. Her relationship history shows pattern of settling. In The Way We Was, Marge chooses Homer over Artie Ziff. Artie is successful, educated, has prospects. Homer is lovable, but obviously going nowhere. Marge chose passion over practical compatibility, and she's been paying for that choice ever since by enabling Homer's dysfunction instead of demanding better. Think about her impact on the children. Lisa sees intelligent woman sacrificing dreams for dysfunctional family. That teaches Lisa that women's intelligence doesn't matter if family needs conflict with personal goals. Lisa is learning from Marge that self-sacrifice is what good women do, even when it destroys them. Bart learns that actions have no real consequences if someone loves you enough to clean up your messes. Marge constantly rescues Bart from consequences of his behavior. She makes excuses to teachers, covers for him with Homer, prevents him from facing discipline that might actually teach him accountability. Maggie is growing up in chaos that Marge refuses to address. The baby witnesses domestic violence, financial crises, emotional abuse, all normalized by Marge's acceptance. Maggie's silence might be response to understanding that speaking means acknowledging dysfunction family pretends doesn't exist. The gambling episode shows Marge has her own addictive escape mechanisms. When she develops gambling problem, it reveals she's just as capable of destructive behavior as Homer, but she judges herself harshly while excusing Homer's identical patterns. That double standard shows her self-worth is destroyed. Look at moments when Marge tries to set boundaries. She threatens to leave, demands Homer change, expresses her needs, but she always backs down. She can't follow through on consequences because leaving would mean admitting her entire adult life was built on mistake. That's too painful, so she stays and continues enabling. Her mother's example shows intergenerational pattern. Marge's mother also stayed with difficult man, also made excuses, also sacrificed herself. Marge learned enabling from her mother and is now teaching it to her daughter. The dysfunction gets passed down through generations of women who can't imagine better options. Think about Marge's social isolation. She has few real friends. Her sisters judge her choices. She's cut off from support systems that might help her see her situation clearly. That isolation is partly chosen and partly result of her life being consumed by managing Homer and children. She has no identity outside being the family's stabilizer. Her health suffers from the stress. Multiple episodes show Marge experiencing anxiety, stress-related symptoms, exhaustion. Her body is breaking down from years of absorbing family dysfunction without support. But she doesn't seek help because admitting she's struggling would mean admitting the family isn't working. The Homer Alone episode shows what happens when Marge finally breaks. She has complete breakdown, runs away to spa, can't function anymore. But even that crisis doesn't lead to lasting change. She comes back, everything returns to normal. Family learns nothing. Her breakdown becomes just another crisis they survived rather than wake-up call for necessary change. What's really damaging is how Marge frames her enabling as love. She tells herself she's holding family together through devotion and sacrifice. She can't see that her enabling is actually preventing growth and perpetuating dysfunction. She's confused self-destruction with virtue. Her impact on Homer is arguably most toxic. By never enforcing real consequences, Marge has enabled Homer to remain perpetual child. He doesn't have to think about money because Marge handles it. He doesn't have to manage emotions because Marge does emotional labor. He doesn't have to consider impacts of his behavior because Marge absorbs the damage. She's created adult infant who can't function independently. Think about what would have to happen for Marge to leave. She'd have to admit her marriage was a mistake, except she wasted decades on someone who won't change. Figure out how to support herself and children alone. Face judgment from family and community. Start over in middle age with no career. It's too overwhelming, so she stays and pretends everything's fine. The tragedy is that Marge's enabling ultimately ensures everyone stays trapped. Homer won't change because he doesn't have to. Children won't learn healthy relationships because they're not seeing one modeled. Marge won't leave because she's invested too much. Everyone's future is constrained by Marge's inability to stop enabling and demand better. What makes Marge's enablement truly damaging is that her children are learning that love means accepting abuse and dysfunction. Lisa sees that intelligence and dreams don't matter if you sacrifice them for family. Bart learns that actions have no real consequences if you have someone to clean up after you. Maggie is growing up in chaos Marge refuses to address. By trying to hold the family together, Marge is teaching the next generation to accept and perpetuate the same dysfunction, ensuring the cycle continues even after she's gone. Now let's talk about Apu's immigration exploitation story. Apu might be trapped in modern slavery situation through immigration, law exploitation, and corporate abuse. His working conditions, hours, and treatment represent systematic human rights abuse disguised as immigrant opportunity story. The hours alone are illegal. Apu mentions working 96-hour weeks. That's nearly 14 hours daily, 7 days a week. Nobody voluntarily works those hours long term. People work like that when they're coerced through immigration status threats, debt bondage, or exploitation of vulnerability. Apu is being worked like slave. His job is beneath his qualifications. Multiple episodes establish Apu has computer science PhD from Caltech. He's highly educated, skilled, should be working tech industry making six figures. Instead, he's running convenience store for poverty wages. Why? Because his visa status prevents him from finding work that matches his qualifications. The Quickie Mart Corporation is exploiting him. They own the store, but Apu bears all risks. He's there constantly, takes all the abuse, handles dangerous situations like robberies. But corporate takes the profits. Apu gets minimal compensation while doing all actual work. That's labor exploitation designed into the franchise model. Think about the robbery danger. Apu has been shot, robbed at gunpoint, threatened countless times. His workplace is genuinely dangerous. Any reasonable person would quit. But Apu can't quit because his visa depends on this specific employment. If he leaves, he gets deported. The company knows this and uses it to keep him working in unsafe conditions. Much Apu about nothing shows how precarious his immigration status is. When Springfield has anti-immigrant panic, Apu faces deportation despite having lived there for years and contributing to community. His entire life can be destroyed by administrative decision. That vulnerability keeps him accepting exploitation because fighting back means risking everything. His family in India expects him to succeed in America and send money. He's supporting relatives through remittances. That obligation means he can't just quit even if he could legally. He's financially responsible for people back home who depend on his income. The family pressure compounds the workplace exploitation. Look at his living situation. There's no indication where Apu lives or if he has life outside the store. He's at work essentially 24/7. Does he even have an apartment, or does he sleep in back room? His entire existence seems to be the Quickie Mart, which suggests he's trapped there physically as well as economically. The arranged marriage episode reveals his isolation from Indian community. He needs family in India to find him wife because he hasn't maintained connections in America. He's been working too much to build community or social life. That isolation makes him more vulnerable because he has no support network to help him escape exploitation. Think about the language barrier exploitation. Apu speaks perfect English, but corporation probably uses language and cultural differences to confuse labor rights. Immigrants often don't know American labor laws, can't navigate legal system, and are afraid to complain. That ignorance gets exploited by employers. The franchise model is designed for exploitation. Corporate takes percentage of sales, but doesn't bear costs. Apu has to pay for inventory, maintenance, insurance, everything, while working impossible hours to keep store profitable. If he fails, he loses everything and faces deportation. If he succeeds, corporate takes most of the profit. His education debt might be another form of bondage. Getting PhD in America as international student requires significant money. He might owe student loans that he can't discharge if deported. That debt keeps him trapped in work that doesn't match his qualifications because he needs any income to service the loans. Look at how customers treat him. Constant mockery of his accent, cultural mockery, racist jokes, physical abuse. He has to smile through treatment that would be illegal harassment in normal workplace. But convenience, store workers, especially immigrant workers, are expected to tolerate abuse because customer is always right. The health impacts are severe. Working 96 hours weekly causes chronic stress, sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion. Apu shows signs of being ground down by impossible schedule. His body is breaking down from exploitation that would be illegal if labor laws were enforced. But they're not enforced for immigrant workers in vulnerable positions. Think about his lack of labor protections. No overtime pay, no benefits, no sick leave, no vacation. He works through holidays, family events, everything. If he gets sick, he still has to work because closing store means losing money. That's worse than American workers faced in early industrial revolution. The visa sponsorship creates power imbalance. Quickie Mart Corporation sponsors Apu's visa, which means they control his immigration status. If he complains about exploitation, they can revoke sponsorship and he gets deported. That power relationship makes genuine consent impossible. Apu can't freely quit because quitting equals deportation. His intelligence and education make the exploitation more tragic. Apu is smart enough to see exactly how he's being exploited. He understands the systems trapping him, but his intelligence doesn't help him escape because the trap is structural, not based on ignorance. Smart people can be exploited just as thoroughly as anyone else when systems are designed for exploitation. Look at government's role. Immigration enforcement terrorizes workers into accepting abuse. Labor law enforcement is absent. Corporate regulators don't investigate franchise exploitation. Every system that should protect workers has failed Apu because he's immigrant in vulnerable status who can be easily exploited. The opportunity narrative is propaganda. America promises immigrants opportunity to succeed through hard work. Apu works harder than almost anyone, but he's trapped in poverty while corporation profits from his labor. The opportunity story hides exploitation by blaming victims for not succeeding when system is designed to extract their labor without compensation. Think about how many Apus exist in reality. Convenience stores, restaurants, cleaning services, agriculture all employ immigrants in similar conditions. Apu represents thousands of actual workers trapped through visa status in exploitative employment they can't escape. His fictional exploitation reflects real systematic human rights abuse. What's most disturbing is how normalized his exploitation is. Springfield treats Apu's constant presence at store as quirky character trait rather than evidence of abuse. Nobody questions why he's always working. Nobody sees anything wrong with his schedule. The abuse is so thoroughly normalized that even Apu has internalized it as just how things are for immigrants in America. The really dark reality is that Apu represents modern slavery system. He can't quit without life-destroying consequences. He works extreme hours for minimal pay. Corporation extracts maximum value from his labor while providing minimum compensation. His visa status prevents escape. Every element of his situation matches definitions of forced labor and human trafficking. But it's all technically legal because immigration and labor laws are designed to allow exactly this kind of exploitation of vulnerable workers who can't fight back. Up next is Treehouse of Horror reality contamination theory. The Treehouse of Horror episodes might not be separate from main continuity. They might be contaminating main reality with horror elements that persist and spread. The evidence suggests barriers between horror universe and regular universe are breaking down. Main series episodes reference Treehouse of Horror events directly. Characters occasionally mention things that happened in horror episodes as if they're real memories. Those references shouldn't exist if horror episodes are completely separate canon. The fact that they bleed through suggests the timelines are connected. The increasing darkness in regular episodes matches Treehouse contamination pattern. Early Simpsons seasons are relatively light-hearted. Later seasons become progressively darker, more cynical, more violent. That tonal shift could be horror reality slowly contaminating main timeline, making everything darker as supernatural influence spreads. Look at impossible events in main series. Things happen that violate physical laws but aren't explained. Characters survive impossible situations. Reality bends in ways that should be shocking but everyone accepts. That casual impossibility suggests main Springfield is already partially contaminated by horror universe's rules. Think about character deaths and resurrections. People die in episodes, then are alive again next week with no explanation. That's not just reset button. It's evidence that death doesn't work properly in Springfield anymore. Horror universe's fluid relationship with mortality is bleeding into main timeline. The timeline inconsistencies match reality contamination. Springfield's history contradicts itself constantly. Dates don't make sense. Characters' backstories change. The timeline is unstable, like it's being corrupted by alternate reality where time doesn't flow consistently. Meta-commentary about the show's reality appears more frequently in later seasons. Characters acknowledge they're in TV show, reference the writers, break fourth wall. That meta-awareness could be them sensing their reality is unstable and contaminated by outside forces. Homer's increasing superhuman durability might be horror contamination. Early Homer gets hurt normally. Later, Homer survives things that should be fatal. His invincibility could be supernatural influence from Treehouse episodes where death is meaningless. Horror universes' rules are replacing normal physics. Look at supernatural elements appearing in main episodes. Ghosts, prophecies, impossible coincidences, events that suggest supernatural intervention. These elements are treated as real within main continuity, suggesting supernatural is already established in Springfield's reality. The town's increasing dysfunction might be contamination. Springfield gets progressively more dystopian, government more corrupt, people more violent, reality more absurd. That's consistent with horror, influence slowly transforming normal town into nightmare reflection of itself. Think about how Treehouse of Horror episodes have evolved. Early ones are clearly separate stories. Later ones are less clearly demarcated from main continuity. The boundaries are dissolving over time, suggesting increasing contamination rather than maintaining separation. Character behavior in main series sometimes matches their horror versions. Homer shows violence and cruelty similar to his horror incarnations. Bart displays sociopathy, seen in evil Bart versions. The horror personality traits are manifesting in main timeline characters. Springfield's isolation from outside world might be contamination effect. The town exists in bubble where normal rules don't apply. That isolation could be horror universe influence creating pocket reality separate from rest of America. Look at technology inconsistencies. Springfield has tech from different eras simultaneously. Past and future technology coexist impossibly. That temporal confusion matches horror universe where time doesn't work normally. The recurring apocalypses in flash forwards could be showing contamination's end result. Multiple future episodes show Springfield destroyed or transformed into dystopia. Horror universe might be slowly consuming main timeline, with future episodes showing the completion of that process. Think about Lisa's increasing awareness. She often seems to recognize something is wrong with Springfield's reality. Her depression and existential dread might come from subconsciously sensing the horror contamination affecting her world. Burns's impossible survival matches his horror incarnations. In Treehouse episodes, Burns is often vampire, alien, or supernatural being. His main timeline survival of impossible conditions suggests those supernatural characteristics are bleeding through. The town's acceptance of impossibility shows contaminated thinking. Springfield residents don't question obvious impossibilities. They become acclimated to broken reality where anything can happen. That acceptance is contamination changing how they process reality. Look at Halloween's timing. Treehouse episodes air in October, and sometimes immediately following episodes reference strange events or aftermath. The contamination might be strongest during Halloween, spreading from horror episodes into surrounding continuity. The increasing self-referentiality of the show could be characters becoming aware of contamination. When they reference being in TV show or acknowledge absurdity of their existence, they might be glimpsing truth that their reality is infected by supernatural influence. Think about what happens when contamination completes. Eventually, no distinction between horror episodes and main timeline. Springfield becomes permanent nightmare, where horror universe rules completely replace normal physics and mortality. The show is documenting slow-motion reality corruption. Maggie might be key to contamination. She doesn't age while everyone else experiences time. Her frozen state could be connection point between timelines. She might be anchor holding, main reality open to horror universe influence. The most unsettling possibility is that contamination is irreversible and spreading beyond Springfield. Other towns might be experiencing similar reality breaks. The horror universe could be expanding into entire Simpsons world, consuming all of reality, one town at a time. Each Treehouse of Horror weakens barriers between universes. Every horror episode is intrusion into main timeline that leaves residue. The contamination accumulates over decades until boundaries dissolve completely. Horror universe isn't separate anymore. It's merged with main reality so thoroughly that distinguishing them becomes impossible. What started as safe Halloween specials has become dimensional breach, allowing nightmare reality to pour into main timeline. Springfield isn't just setting for stories anymore. It's contaminated zone, where horror and normalcy blend into hybrid reality that's neither, but somehow both. The Simpson family isn't dealing with normal life anymore. They're slowly being consumed by darkness from their own horror stories, and no one can stop the contamination from spreading until everything is horror and nothing is separate anymore. But before we continue, subscribe to our channel. Grandpa Simpson might be completely aware inside his deteriorating mind, trapped and unable to communicate that he's still there. His dementia might not be complete cognitive loss. It might be lucid consciousness trapped in body and brain that won't respond properly to his will. Raging Abe Simpson and his grumbling grandson, shows Grandpa, can be completely coherent when discussing Lovejoy. His military memories are vivid, detailed, emotionally present. He's not confused about the war. He remembers tactical details, personal relationships, specific events. That coherence in specific domains suggests his mind isn't uniformly damaged. Lady Bouvier's lover shows Grandpa can function normally when properly motivated. When pursuing romance with Marge's mother, he's sharp, witty, socially appropriate. His cognition dramatically improves when he has reason to focus. That variability suggests he's capable of much more than his usual presentation indicates. Think about what that means. Grandpa might be fully aware most of the time, but unable to make his body cooperate with his intentions. He wants to speak clearly, but words come out wrong. He wants to behave appropriately, but can't. Control his actions. He's prisoner in failing body, watching himself malfunction. The moments of clarity are heartbreaking. When Grandpa says something insightful or displays intact memory, it shows his real mind breaking through the dementia. Those moments reveal someone fully present and aware, trapped behind cognitive failures he can't control. His awareness of being forgotten is evident. When family doesn't visit or call, Grandpa knows it and feels hurt. That emotional awareness requires cognitive capacity to track relationships and understand neglect. He's not too deteriorated to notice he's being abandoned. He's deteriorated enough that no one takes his awareness seriously. Look at his living situation. Dumped in nursing home where staff is negligent. His family rarely visits. When they do visit, they clearly want to leave quickly. Grandpa sees this abandonment clearly. He understands his family has discarded him. That awareness, while being unable to prevent or change it, is psychological torture. The nursing home itself is institutional abuse. Residents are neglected, sometimes abused, given minimal care. Grandpa is coherent enough to know he's in terrible place, but trapped by age and infirmity. He can't leave. He can't improve his situation. He can only endure it while fully aware of how bad it is. Think about his financial situation. His military pension probably covers nursing home costs, but nothing extra. He has no money for comfort or dignity. The home provides minimal care. His family doesn't supplement to improve his situation. He's aware he's impoverished and nobody cares. His physical decline is compounding. Body failures make cognitive symptoms worse. When you're in pain, exhausted, malnourished, your brain can't function optimally. Grandpa's dementia might be partly reversible if he received proper medical care, nutrition, physical therapy, but he's not getting that care. The medical neglect is obvious. Dementia patients need proper assessment, treatment plans, medication management. There's no indication Grandpa receives any of this. He's been diagnosed with old age and warehoused. Actual medical intervention that could help is absent. Look at how family treats his stories. When Grandpa talks about his past, everyone dismisses him as rambling old man. But many of his stories are probably true. His WT service definitely happened. Other stories might be accurate memories that family dismisses as confusion. He's trying to share his history and nobody listens. His anger makes sense as response to his situation. Grandpa is often irritable, combative, unpleasant. That's not just dementia. That's someone furious about being abandoned, neglected, trapped in terrible facility while family that should care doesn't. His anger is rational response to objective mistreatment. Think about his memories of Homer's childhood. Grandpa raised Homer and clearly remembers it, but Homer barely visits. The man who raised him has been discarded. Grandpa must feel that betrayal intensely. He sacrificed to raise Homer, and Homer repays that by abandoning him to rot in nursing home. The episodic memory failures might be different from awareness. Grandpa might forget recent events, but remain aware of his current situation and emotional state. You can lose episodic memory while maintaining emotional cognition and sense of self. His confusion about details doesn't mean he's unaware of his suffering. His occasional escapes from the home show he understands his situation and wants out. When he leaves, he's seeking something better than the neglect he endures daily. Those escape attempts are rational behavior from someone trapped in institutional abuse, not just confused wandering. Look at his social isolation. Other nursing home residents are also cognitively impaired. He has no one to talk to who understands him. Staff treats residents like children. Grandpa is isolated in community of confused people where no one recognizes he's more present than he appears. The sleep disruption common in facilities makes everything worse. Nursing homes are loud, bright, constantly active. Grandpa probably doesn't sleep well. Chronic sleep deprivation worsens cognition, mood, physical health. His symptoms might be partly from institutional environment rather than pure dementia. Think about what he's lost: independence, home, purpose, daily structure, social connections, family proximity. Each loss compounds the others. He's experiencing a cascade of deprivations that would devastate anyone's mental state. His cognitive symptoms might be partly response to environmental impoverishment. His physical pain is probably constant. Old age brings arthritis, injuries that don't heal, chronic conditions that cause pain. There's no indication Grandpa receives adequate pain management. He's suffering physically while his cognitive issues prevent him from effectively communicating about pain. The awareness of his own decline might be worst part. Grandpa knows he's deteriorating. He can feel his mind and body failing. He's watching himself lose capabilities. That awareness, without ability to stop or slow the decline, creates horror of being conscious passenger in failing. Vehicle you can't control. What makes his situation genuinely nightmarish is that he might be fully present for his own mental decay. He's not mercifully unconscious of what's happening. He knows he's forgetting things. He knows he's losing control. He knows his family has given up on him, but his brain won't let him express this clearly or consistently. He's trapped in failing body, abandoned by family, watching his own mind dissolve, unable to make anyone understand that he's still there, and terrified. Next up is Patty and Selma's codependent dysfunction theory. Patty and Selma might be trapped in codependent relationships so severe they literally can't exist as separate people anymore. Their inability to maintain separate identities has created toxic fusion where neither can function independently. They're together constantly throughout the series. Rare episodes showing them apart reveal both become dysfunctional when separated. They can't work independently, can't make decisions alone, can't maintain emotional stability without the other present. That's not close sisterhood, that's pathological dependence. Think about their separate identities, or lack thereof. They dress identically, have same interests, share same opinions, speak in unison. They haven't developed distinct personalities. They function as single units split across two bodies. That fusion suggests identity formation failure, where neither achieved independent selfhood. The DMV job enables their dysfunction. Working together at undifferentiated bureaucratic jobs means they never have to separate or develop professional identities apart from each other. Their employment reinforces codependence by keeping them together in an environment requiring minimal individual initiative. Look at their romantic failures. Both have had relationships attempt separation. Every romantic relationship fails because neither can maintain intimacy while remaining fused to her sister. Romantic partners naturally want exclusive emotional connection. But Patty and Selma can't offer that because they're already enmeshed with each other. Their shared resentment toward Marge's happiness shows how toxicity spreads. They can't be happy for sister who achieved independent life, marriage, family. Her success threatens them by showing that separation from twin and independent life is possible. So they undermine her, rather than confronting their own dysfunction. The cigarette addiction is shared coping mechanism. Both smoke heavily, starting and stopping together, using tobacco to manage anxiety that comes from their enmeshment. They're medicating symptoms of disorder they can't acknowledge because acknowledging it would require separation they're incapable of. Think about their childhood. Twins often develop close bonds, but healthy twins differentiate into distinct people. Patty and Selma never differentiated. Something in childhood prevented normal identity formation. Maybe parents treated them as unit rather than individuals. Maybe each feared abandonment and clung to the other. Their hostility toward Homer might be jealousy of his independence. Homer, successfully separated from his family of origin, maintains distinct identity despite dysfunction. Patty and Selma resent him for achieving independence they can't manage. Their cruelty toward him expresses rage at their own trapped state. Look at how they make decisions. They don't negotiate or compromise. They simply agree automatically. That automatic agreement isn't healthy consensus. It's evidence neither has developed capacity for independent thought. They've merged cognitive processes to a degree where disagreement becomes impossible. Their emotional regulation is dysfunctional because they've externalized it onto each other. Neither has developed internal emotional management. They rely on their twin for emotional stability. When separated, both become dysregulated because they've never learned to manage feelings independently. The MacGyver obsession is telling. They fixate on fictional character who's supremely independent and capable. That fascination might be compensation for their own lack of autonomy. They worship trait they don't possess and can't develop because their codependence prevents it. Think about their cruelty toward others. People trapped in unhealthy relationships often project their misery onto outsiders. Patty and Selma's constant meanness might be displaced rage about their own situation. They're angry about being trapped together but can't direct that anger appropriately, so everyone else becomes target. Their mutual reinforcement of negative traits is toxic cycle. Each enables the other's worst tendencies. They validate each other's cruelty, resentment, cynicism. Without external input to challenge these patterns, the negativity intensifies over time. They're making each other worse while preventing growth. The fact that they're Bouvier twins adds dimension. Their mother presumably raised them. What family dynamic created this level of enmeshment? Did mother treat them as unit? Did she prevent healthy separation? The codependence might be intergenerational pattern. Look at their age. They're middle-aged women who never achieved independence. The window for developing autonomous identity is closing. Each year of continued fusion makes separation less likely. They're becoming permanently enmeshed with no path to individual existence. Their awareness of dysfunction appears occasionally. When one has a brief moment of wanting something different, you can see panic in the other's eyes. They know on some level that they're trapped, but acknowledging that explicitly would require confronting decades of wasted potential and identity failure, too painful to face. Think about their future. What happens when one dies? The survivor would face complete identity collapse. She's never existed independently. She has no separate self to fall back on. One twin's death would be psychological annihilation of the other because the survivor has no independent identity to continue without her twin. Their professions at DMV allow them to inflict their misery on others. They're petty tyrants within bureaucratic system, using minimal power to make others miserable. That power dynamic lets them feel control they don't have over their own lives. They're trapped and powerless, so they trap and disempower others. The judgment they direct at Marge's choices is projection. They criticize her marriage, parenting, life choices because her independence highlights their lack of it. Every criticism is really about their own failures. They're not judging Marge. They're expressing self-hatred disguised as judgment of sister who escaped trap they're in. Look at their home life. Do they live separately? Together? The show never clearly establishes this, suggesting their living situation is so enmeshed that even living separately they'd be functionally together. Their entire lives overlap completely regardless of physical housing arrangements. What makes their codependency truly tragic is that they're both aware of it and hate it. They resent each other for preventing independence, but they're psychologically unable to separate. Each one's identity has become so intertwined with the other that existing alone feels like death. So they stay trapped together in mutual resentment, making each other worse, unable to escape or change. They're dying slowly in each other's presence, sacrificing individuality for false security of never being alone, losing themselves completely while pretending they're choosing this life rather than being imprisoned by it. Moving on to Springfield's economic collapse theory. Springfield might be in permanent economic depression with no recovery possible, doomed to increasing poverty and decline. The town's economy is in death spiral that can only worsen, never improve, trapping everyone in inevitable financial catastrophe. Business failures happen constantly. Stores close regularly. New businesses open and fail within episodes. The business district is perpetually declining. That's not normal economic cycle of growth and contraction. That's systematic business environment failure where entrepreneurship can't succeed. Look at the employment situation. Most adults work low-wage service jobs or are unemployed. Professional careers are rare. The nuclear plant employs many people but pays poorly. There's no diverse economic base supporting sustainable middle-class employment. The town economy is hollowed out. The tax base is collapsing. Businesses close, property values decline, population shrinks, all reducing tax revenue. Meanwhile, infrastructure needs increase as everything ages. Springfield can't maintain services with declining revenue. The gap between needs and resources grows wider every year. Public infrastructure is visibly failing. Roads have potholes. Bridges are unsafe. Public buildings are decrepit. Water and sewer systems are old. The physical plant of the town is degrading faster than it can be maintained. Future repair costs will be catastrophic. Think about the monorail episode. Springfield had budget surplus and wasted it on scam instead of investing in productive infrastructure or economic development. That pattern repeats constantly. When resources become available, they're mismanaged or stolen. The town can't make good decisions about economic development. The school system failure compounds economic problems. Children aren't getting education that prepares them for good jobs. Each generation graduates less qualified than previous. That reduces human capital and earning potential. The workforce quality is declining along with infrastructure. Look at the brain drain. Smart people leave Springfield if they can. Lisa's flash forwards often show her leaving. Other capable people presumably escape to cities with better opportunities. Springfield retains people who can't leave, losing its most talented residents to more functional economies. Burns' nuclear plant is unsustainable anchor. It's the town's major employer, but it's old, dangerous, environmentally destructive. When it eventually closes or is forced to shut down for safety, Springfield loses its largest employer with no replacement in sight. That closure will be economic apocalypse. The retail sector is dying. Shops in downtown Springfield are empty. Big box stores presumably exist outside town. Local businesses can't compete with chains. The downtown commercial district is becoming ghost town as retail relocates or closes. That kills foot traffic and accelerates decline. Think about housing values. Property in declining town loses value. Residents can't sell homes for what they paid. They're trapped with underwater mortgages in houses they can't afford to maintain. Declining property values reduce wealth and trap people economically. The crime rate makes economic recovery impossible. Businesses won't invest in high crime areas. Residents who can afford to leave. Crime and poverty feed each other in downward spiral. Springfield's crime problem prevents business development that might improve economy. Corruption diverts resources from productive use. Mayor Quimby takes bribes. Contracts go to mob-connected companies that do terrible work. Public money gets stolen or wasted. The corruption tax on all economic activity makes legitimate business less profitable and discourages investment. Look at future episodes. Flash forwards consistently show Springfield in worse condition. The town is never shown improving. Every glimpse of future shows continued or accelerated decline. That consistency across different possible futures suggests the trajectory is inevitable. The environmental damage limits economic options. Three-eyed fish and toxic waste mean Springfield's environment is poisoned. That rules out tourism, agriculture, or any industry depending on clean environment. The contamination is permanent limitation on economic possibility. Think about demographics. Young people leave when they can. Old people stay because they can't afford to move. The population is aging, which increases healthcare and social service costs while reducing tax base. The demographic trend makes economic problems worse. The hospital situation is economically significant. Healthcare is major expense. If Springfield's hospital is as dysfunctional as suggested, residents face health problems that reduce productivity. Medical crises cause bankruptcy. Poor health care has economic consequences beyond just health outcomes. Financial institutions probably avoid Springfield. Banks don't want to lend in declining markets. Businesses can't get startup capital. Residents can't get mortgages. Without access to credit, economic development becomes nearly impossible. The financial system has written off Springfield as unviable. Look at the entertainment sector. The town has movie theater, bowling alley, Moe's Tavern. These are low-margin businesses barely surviving. There's no vibrant entertainment economy generating jobs and drawing visitors. The leisure sector is as depressed as everything else. The housing stock is deteriorating. Most houses were built decades ago. Maintenance is deferred because residents can't afford it. Homes are degrading like infrastructure. In 20 years, significant housing will be uninhabitable without major investment that won't happen. Think about utilities. Power, water, sewer, garbage systems all require maintenance. As systems age, maintenance costs increase. Springfield can't afford necessary infrastructure investment. Eventually, systems will fail catastrophically, making areas of town unlivable. What makes Springfield's economic collapse most depressing is the trajectory. Every indicator shows continued decline. Tax base shrinking, population aging, infrastructure failing, businesses closing, crime increasing, environment poisoning. There's no countervailing trend suggesting improvement. The future is objectively worse than present, and present is worse than past. The most disturbing aspect is that people stuck in Springfield know they're trapped in declining town with no future. They watch businesses close, infrastructure crumble, opportunities disappear, but they can't leave because they lack resources to relocate. They're conscious prisoners in town that's dying, watching their own futures narrow with every year of continued decline, unable to escape the economic death spiral that will eventually consume everything.